sorry. Hi, everyone. I have 6:02 on my computer, so I'm calling this meeting to order. It is the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Mercer Island School District. It is September 9th. We have all 5 board directors in attendance. Does anyone care to make a motion to establish the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. No one abstaining. The agenda is established as printed and electronically distributed. We have the first item on our agenda is the fantastic welcoming of our new student representatives to the board, and we will be swearing in our new junior student representative.
I would like Andrew Howison to join me at the podium. I guess we can call it that. So Andrew, we are going to ask you to take the oath of office, so please repeat after me. I, state your name, have been selected to be a student representative
I, Andrew Howison, have been selected to be a student representative
on the board of directors of the Mercer Island School District.
on the board of directors of the Mercer Island School District.
Do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties
Do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties,
and responsibilities of this office to the best of my ability,
the duties and responsibilities of this office to the best of my ability,
and as prescribed by Board Policy and Procedure 1250.
and as prescribed by Board Policy and Procedure 1250.
Congratulations. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
And Reeves, do you know if we're going to need to use the mic, or can we move it over to be used?
I think we can use it over there.
President Murray, I hope you don't mind if we also do a recognition for in celebration of National Hispanic Heritage Month. The date is September 15th to October 15th. And each year, Americans observe by celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. This important month is another one of the celebrations that we like to acknowledge as we educate our children about the diversity within our community and, of course, our country. So recognition of National Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15th through October 15th.
Thank you. We are now going into public input, and we have only two people who signed up to give public input, and I believe they are both participating by Zoom. So just the standard disclaimer, this meeting is a meeting of the board in public. It is not a public meeting that guarantees interaction between members of the public and members of the board. If you, you have completed the form and submitted it more than 60 minutes in advance, great. When addressing the board at the meeting, please limit your remarks to not more than 3 minutes. If the concern is a group concern, please appoint a spokesperson, and if desired, provide written documentation to the board secretary. Public comments that name or otherwise identify a district student are not permitted without permission of that student's parent or guardian. The board may direct the superintendent to respond at a later date to the issues expressed. So our first public inputter is Liz Borski. I can't see, actually. I'm still having trouble with Zoom on my laptop, so I can't see if we have Liz.
Liz,
We're working on it.
Liz, if you can hear us, can you turn your camera on? We've made you a panelist.
Great. Hi, Liz, go ahead. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. It's certainly been a roller coaster of a run up and start to the school year, but I'm so grateful that we've made it. It's wonderful to have all the Mercer Island students back in school, full time, in person, 5 days a week for the first time in 537 days or 76 and a half weeks. I'm sure it has been very difficult to navigate as the district had to balance the number of teachers to students, coordinate classes, and figure out lunch patterns, all within the COVID protocol boundaries. I want to thank the district and all who've worked tirelessly to get us here. In particular, thank you to the school nurses and the cleaning staff, who are our frontline defenses in managing impacted students, undertaking contact tracing, and cleaning the buildings. I really appreciate you and all that you have done. Reading through the 28 pages of the district's COVID-19 response plan, I was really struck by the thoroughness of what safety controls are in place and that you've thought of everything. The data collected by Mercer Island last year demonstrates the effectiveness of these safety measures, and I feel my child is as safe as possible in school. This contrasts with that of Lake Washington School District, where last week 80 students at the Kamiakin Middle School had to be quarantined after 2 students were found to be COVID positive. What most people don't know is that the transportation team there did not follow the protocols, and students on one particular bus were not put into assigned seats or socially distanced. So when one student turned up positive, they didn't know which of the kids were close contacts, and so all of them were quarantined, regardless of their vaccination status. Such lax implementation would never happen here on Mercer Island. That being said, COVID-19 is now endemic. Attaining 0 COVID cases is just not feasible. We will have COVID cases in schools, office buildings, shopping malls, restaurants, cinemas. Children will get sick and adults will get sick. However, we must remain level-headed and take a risk-based approach to minimize cases, and when they arise, deal with them as quickly as possible. The scientific data shows most children will have mild cases, and with 95% and more of Mercer Island residents ages 12 and above being vaccinated, families that unfortunately get infected should not suffer severe illness or death. For families with immunocompromised members, the ability to undertake online school is a feasible alternative. I know there are some very vocal parents who are advocating for stricter safety protocols, many of which will add effort and only give a false sense of safety. Our children have lost so much over the last 76 and a half weeks. The focus should be on educating them, catching them up, and getting back on track socially. I encourage the district to stay the course, watch what happens, and adjust later if necessary. Please do not bow to the pressure to dilute the ever tighter budget to support frivolous health measures that go above and beyond the Washington State Department of Health requirements. I appreciate the difficulty of the decisions that you must make at this time and the pressures that you are under. You have my and my husband's full support. Thank you again for all that you do.
Thank you. Our next public inputter is Megan Hamill. Just a moment.
Megan, can you turn your camera on?
There's a message in the chat that says she's not able to speak today. I don't know if that's still relevant.
Oh.
Oh.
A message from her. Oh, okay.
Is she typing or sending the message?
It's in the chat for the Zoom. Yeah. It says, I'm not able to speak today. Sorry. Megan.
Okay, thank you. In that case, that's it for public input. Thank you. We will then move on to the student representative board report. The board policy 1250. Looking forward to hearing from our new rep. Okay, we can go ahead and start.
So, hi everybody. We hope that everyone is having a great start to the school year so far. And Andrew and I are excited to be presenting our first in-person board report. So we're really looking forward to working with all of you as we get back into the swing of things. And we're just excited to continue advocating for student voice this year.
We have not yet had the opportunity to meet with our superintendent student advisory board. So we did our best to gather information from all the schools, but we're hoping by next meeting, we're going to have some student perspective from the elementary, and middle school.
So to start off, over at the elementary school, they all been welcoming back students with all sorts of activities, some including Island Park's Back to School Dash and Lakeridge's Fall Family Picnic. And the elementaries will be hosting their curriculum nights coming as well, with Lakeridge and Northwood on September 13th and Island Park and West Mercer's on September 14th.
The middle school had a great start to the school year with the 8th grade web leaders helping a smooth transition for our brand new 6th graders. IMS has volleyball and cross country as their fall sports, and IMS also has a lot of new clubs this school year, including creative writing, justice, and understanding support team and dance club.
So at the high school, students are very, very excited to be back in person. I know I am. We're definitely bringing back the school spirit. Leadership recently hosted our first assembly back together, which was held outside on the field, including performances from the drill team, the cheer team, some student games, including a round of musical chairs with all the sports captains, which got pretty intense, and some other pretty fun activities.
We also had our first home football game of the season. We did not win, but the stadium was packed and the spirit was high. During halftime, the band gave us a sneak peek of what they're going to be performing alongside Mackmore at the upcoming Seahawks game on September 19th. And they've been very hard at work practicing. The varsity girls soccer also won their first game on Tuesday. And last night, the girls volleyball team also beat Skyline in all 3 sets.
Yeah, so as for in school, the hallways have been very packed, which has definitely been kind of exciting, but also a little alarming to get used to again. And then the lunchroom, tables are restricted to 6 people per table now. And actually, not all students are loving this or following this, but most are trying their best to make it work. And then a lot of clubs are also started this week, and Student Senate is opening applications next week as well.
Since it's the first couple of weeks of school, teachers are still taking it pretty easy to go over syllabi. I think that's it. But a lot of the students are definitely nervous at adjusting back into the full in-person workload again.
Yeah, so lastly, just wanted to thank all the teachers, administrators, district staff, and faculty for just working so hard over the summer to get us back into the building. And just like being in my classes, the morale has felt so high. I know personally, I'm just excited to learn again, and just being in person has already felt so great. So thank you all. That's all we have for you.
I don't think Zoom conveys that very well, but that was all of us. Thank you guys very much. I'm looking forward to continuing to hear from you throughout the year. Moving on to Superintendent Report. Oh, sorry, yeah.
I apologize. We actually do have one more person who submitted a form this
Oh,
morning.
great.
Unfortunately, it was just sent to me and not Michelle, and so
Gotcha.
they reached out to me.
Sure.
So it's McCall Avery, and I
Okay.
have promoted her.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize.
McCall, can you please turn your camera on and make sure that you are unmuted? Hello.
Hi.
You have 3 minutes.
Great. Can you guys see me and hear me? Hi, can you guys see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks. I can't wait to see you guys in person, like in real life. So I just want to say congratulations and thank you for a wonderful return to school. And both of my girls are so happy for the full days in class with new friends and teachers, and they especially enjoy art, PE, and music. And while not thrilled to be wearing a mask, they say they're willing to do whatever it takes for them to sit in a class with friends and enjoy the luxury of public education that we all took for granted. And specifically, I want to extend a giant thank you to the huge sacrifice and the scrubbing of the servant leaders and nurses working tirelessly to clean and disinfect our schools, buses, and materials used on campus routinely, plus the staff members showing up early and staying late to make our schools sparkle, shine, and safe. We know you help make the safe return possible, and you have our profound respect and gratitude. Meanwhile, I wanted to say, please do not allow a vocal minority to take away your attention, effort, and energy from a strong and successful school return. Stay focused on the mission, passion, and proven protocols. COVID zero is unrealistic. Please do not try to bubble wrap our kids or our community. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I'm so sorry to share this, but we're all going to die eventually. That's the reality. So we have to learn how to balance how we're going to do things. So now there's Delta and Lambda and Mu, and there likely will always be something to do with COVID in our lifetimes for the time being. And accepting this new reality and taking smart risks are our jobs as people and parents and professionals and citizens. As you know, 39 states educated and fed students on K through 12 campuses all last year. I appreciate Mercer Island, Washington, making this happen after 537 days away from the traditional school model. And I commend you for creating health and safety protocols to balance the need to educate our children in a classroom and help the whole child thrive. Personally, the cocoon effect of so many vaccinated adults on Mercer Island in our tiny town brings me great comfort. I hope that does for others as well. Congratulations on a return well done. You have the prayers and support of our family, and good luck for a great year.
Thank you, Nicole. Okay, now moving on to Superintendent Report.
So we do have a slide deck, and so while Fred's loading that up, I would like to start by just reminding everyone that what makes Mercer Island a special place to live and work in our small town is really the sense of community. As this pandemic continues to grip our nation, state, and our island community, we adults must remember that Mercer Island is a compassionate community where empathy and kindness are far better reactions than anger and shaming. Please always consider that everyone is working from the space of best intentions. Empathy is a skill that we know can be learned. And as adults work through the continually evolving challenges, we must remember that our children are watching and learning from us, the adults who are modeling around them. So tonight we're going to try and answer some of the questions that I know have been sent to the board, that have been sent to our principals. We have our elementary principals available to kind of address each individual school perspective as well.
Andrew, can you promote the principals if you haven't already?
And if you want to move to,
You can promote me as well. I finally got on again.
are you driving? So, as mentioned earlier, we are a learning organization, and that needs to be our priority. It's in our values, vision, and mission that we educate the whole child. And this year, 21-22, is really a balancing act, balancing the academic needs of our students, the health and safety needs, even more so than pre-pandemic, social needs, emotional needs, and mental health needs. I've been spending time in a virtual conference these last 2 days and one more day tomorrow on mental health in schools, 3 days with experts on how we meet the needs of our students and how critical it is for learning to occur for our students to have excellent mental health. So we have this constant dynamic force pushing and pulling constantly, as I mentioned, it's ever evolving. We continue to evolve. But those are some of the pieces that we are considering in all of our decision making. So we want to talk, we know there's been a lot of questions about the our COVID response plan, which does align with the Washington Department of Health guidance. And I'm going to ask Erin to kind of talk through this slide. She is, I do want to thank her because she took the great responsibility of most of the writing in the COVID response plan. last year, and then updating again for this year. Much of it was in partnership with our MIEA, but I know that much of it fell to Erin. So she's going to talk a little bit about the Department of Health guidance. Does Erin have a mic?
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Superintendent Kowalski. One of the questions we keep hearing is, the district follows but does not exceed the DOH recommendations. Why? And that's a challenging question. The first thing is our challenge is to educate students while keeping them healthy and safe. And that is no small task given that we're in the middle of a pandemic. But while we do that, school needs to still feel welcoming and like a school. So we need kids to feel comfortable being here. And they need to be able to feel comfortable to access their education. So we trust the DOH to strap a very careful guidance because it's their task to safeguard our community and our schools against threats like COVID-19. And it's our task to educate students and implement their guidance. Choosing one or two standards to exceed unsettles the balance that the DOH has very carefully struck, and it puts a strain on our system that is already strained with the requirements of the DOH. We have to be cognizant not only of making our students comfortable, but also what we can do. So, because there's always more that we can do, but it's what cost and what impact to our students and our community, and what returns will we get. The other question we're hearing is, well, that guidance came out on August 10th, or there's going to be changes. Can't you anticipate what those changes are? Again, it's the Department of Health's charge to be entrenched and be invested and really follow the science with respect to COVID-19. And they update their guidance regularly, and we pivot. We do monitor what's going on in our community, and we do have regular interactions with Department of Health representatives, and we make adjustments to our own guidance consistent with the feedback we get from the Department of Health. And we do that nearly on a daily basis because in this time we are in contact with Department of Health representatives, again, almost every day or at least every week. And we make those adjustments, again, keep in mind our first priority, which is to educate students, because what we know and what we believe is that students benefit from the in-person learning, and we are trying to keep our schools open, and that is our priority and will continue to be our priority, because we do recognize that there is another impact to students being isolated at home. So that is really what we are doing. And then there's another question, which is, what if we do have to send students home because we are following the guidance and they are being quarantined because they either COVID positive or they've been identified by a close contact? And again, I want to highlight that we do follow and apply the close contact definitions and guidance from the Department of Health, and they are very comfortable, having had recent conversations with them, with how the district is approaching this. And we've been applauded for the efforts of our nurses and how on top of it we are, and how thorough we are. So we're not unduly quarantining people, and we are quarantining people appropriately. But we have a commitment, and our labor partners, MIA, are also committed to serving our students when they cannot access school. We want to make sure that they don't get behind, that they still feel engaged, and that this provides as little disruption as possible to those students who are quarantined. So if a student is quarantined and well enough to access their learning, their teachers will reach out to them within 24 hours, provide them some level of access. They will pivot as quickly as possible, but with no more than 3 days, to provide either live stream classroom instruction or instructor recordings. So the idea is that our students will, even when quarantined, still be connected to school, still see their own teacher, and still be part of our Mercer Island community. So again, our firm goal is always to support our students and help them stay engaged. And sometimes it may be that live streaming and instructor recordings isn't the best model, but we trust our educators to use their professional discretion and to work with families and students to figure out what is best for those students and keep them on course and learning, because again, we want to welcome them back as quickly as possible to the learning environment.
So next, Fred's going to talk about the questions we've had around the dashboard, which is, yes, still there. How often is it updated and who's doing a lot of that work? Fred?
Thank you. Since we started bringing students back last year, we've maintained our COVID dashboard, which has provided a glimpse for our community into the actual, what's actually happening with cases, close contacts across the district in all of our schools and also in our facilities, including this building here. The COVID dashboard is updated on Fridays. We have received some email inquiries wondering when that's going to be updated or how often. We did update it today ahead of this meeting so that I can display it and kind of walk our community and others through it. So those of you here in this room, it's a little harder to see. If you are at home on Zoom, it's probably a little easier. But the general gist of it is we're keeping track of our enrollment numbers so that our community can see how many students are we, do we have enrolled in our schools, roughly how many staff members are in and out of our schools. The caveat to this is we have many staff members who actually work in multiple buildings. And so the exact number that's in a building on any given day does fluctuate to a certain extent. But we try to give as close to estimates as we possibly can. We obviously are tracking what is our current teaching model. And as I'm sitting here next to two students and Morgan was sharing how thrilled she is to be back in person and hearing from them, it is wonderful to have all of these in person. As we move to the right then across our columns, we're tracking the confirmed COVID-19 cases. What that means is in the past 14 days, how many of students are in each of those buildings or staff in each of those buildings who have been confirmed positive. The next column over is just the number of close contacts then that came about because of the cases that we have. And then we have our close contacts in quarantine. It's important to remember that as more and more students are becoming vaccinated, they can become a close contact but not need to quarantine. And there are many different variables that go into that, which is why you're seeing some differences between those columns. And lastly, we look at the last two columns, which are really important ones for us, and that is how many cases were transmitted outside of school versus cases that were transmitted inside of school. Since the beginning of our pandemic all the way through, as you can see, we're reporting one school that had 2 cases that were transmitted, and that is it. So of all the cases this year of close contacts and confirmed cases, you can see that very little is being actually transmitted in our schools. Most of it is transmitted in the community, and then our students or our staff are coming into the school at some period and then testing positive. So we will continue to keep this updated. We want to be transparent with our community, both to show where we're doing really well and where we may be reflective of the greater community. But our overall case counts are in really good shape overall. I think there's been some questions too about how do we compare to other districts? And you heard one of our commenters tonight or our presenters who in public comment about another district. It's really hard to say because everyone is just trying to get the school year going. I did talk to our friends with the CCS and everyone has had some cases in their school districts, but it's really hard to quantify it. And even on the superintendent call this week, Superintendent Klosky and I were hearing that, you know, it was really ranging and even superintendents didn't have an excellent picture because most schools were either just starting this week or had just started like we had. So it's difficult to say how we're doing compared to others.
And I think it's also important to point out that the school that was highlighted, we haven't reached out to that district, but you know, we do have relatives who attend in that district who've been able to report that they were notified of the close contact and they haven't even been to school that day. So there was definitely some large district mishaps that occurred where assigned seating or everybody who rides that bus, even if they didn't ride it that day, was still included in now your close contact. So we are being very strategic in our close contact. I want to remind everyone that Mercer Island School District does have a nurse at each of our schools. That is something that has always been a funding priority. Essential. So moving to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about contact tracing.
This is again where I get an opportunity to kind of jump on that bandwagon of thanking our nurses, our administrators, our front office staff. They are taking each and every case extremely seriously. And as soon as we have information from a parent or a guardian, in some cases, it's an opposing sports team that calls us and lets us know that they had a competitor who may have, or who had COVID, who was in a competition. But as soon as we receive that, we get started. I know our nurses sometimes are working late into the evening on these. Sometimes we're on the phone with them on a Saturday. And it's just the commitment that we all have to making sure that we're moving as quickly as possible, getting information out to our families, and then making sure we're taking the proper steps to keep our students safe and healthy. It really is a collaborative effort. You're going to hear from some of the principals here momentarily around things that they do. I was in 2 of the schools today, and we were going over processes and procedures and working through a number of different scenarios and letters and looking at things. So it is at the top of everyone's mind. We did add some hours to support our nurses this year to support the monitoring. We are going to have to look at that on a week-by-week basis to see if that's even enough or if we can scale it back. Right now, there is certainly plenty of work to go around to make sure that we continue to keep our schools open and operating, and that's what's most important. Sometimes there's been questions about, so what kind of transpires or what happens when there's a case in terms of contact tracing? The first thing we do is, and the age of the student is very important here, but we try to interview the student and figure out where were they, where have they been on any of the buses, have they been in lunchrooms, how many days might they have been in school, when they might have been contagious or have had COVID-19. And so we start determining our close contact, and if you can think of it kind of like concentric circles, and you know, they're kind of going out, and we're looking at those different bands. Then we're talking to our staff, especially the younger the student, the more staff involvement we need, and they help us to determine from that. And then we start kind of just going through our protocol and really who is a close contact. There is a link on here. And that is something that has been a moving target, as we all know, throughout the pandemic. In a K-12 classroom, a close contact is a student who was within 3 feet or closer than 3 feet, oftentimes without a mask, although they could have a mask on, but when they're breaking that 3-foot barrier for extended periods of times throughout a day, so 15 minutes throughout a school day. If a student and another student are wearing masks and they're at 3 feet or more, the student that is next to them is not necessarily considered a close contact. We'll be looking at, were they in small groups? Were they sitting next to each other at lunch? Were there other factors at play? And based on all of that, then our nurses and our administrators work with the DOH. We determine what we believe to be our close contacts. As soon as we determine those, we remove those students from the school setting, contact parents. And it's really important that it's not just, you know, our parents of close contacts, but we're also contacting the entire class or group of students who may have been exposed but aren't close contacts. So we have those who are close contacts, and they're going to be then oftentimes missing school for a given period of time. And then we're also transparent with the rest of the students and their families that while they're not a close contact, there has been someone who they've been near in our school setting who has tested positive for COVID-19. Our nurses work very closely with all of the families to talk about their return to school and what that looks like. There are multiple options, extending from 7 days all the way to 14 days. And it oftentimes depends on vaccination status. It depends on testing availability and willingness by families. But our goal is to try to get students back as quickly as possible, as long as it's safe to do so.
So the next big question has really come around our elementary snack and lunches. And so we're going to quickly review how some of the decision-making has occurred over the entire summer as we've been getting ready to open. And I believe we have some of our principals here who will then also be able to give you specificity for their site, because each site is different.
So it is, I mean, there are multiple variables, and principals, you can go ahead and turn on your cameras and start coming on, and we'll turn it over to you. It is really important to remember that just like every playground is different, actually all of our gym spaces are different. They're not all the same square footage. Not all the schools have the same number of classes that they have to get through the cafeteria in a certain day. Northwood doesn't share a gym with their cafeteria, so there's lots of variables at play. There isn't exact parity between our schools to begin with when we start a year. Some schools need more paraprofessionals and support staff providing supervision just because of the nature of the playground. There are sight lines at Lakeridge when I was principal there, and Heidi knows it well, that make it extremely hard to look across that field. So we add staffing there. When West Mercer had the portables that actually ran all the way down the side, you had a truncated playground, we had more staffing. So each school doesn't do things exactly the same because of the variables at play. And so that's why you've seen some different strategies, and we're going to let the principals talk about the different strategies that they're using in their schools, all while trying to keep kids safe. So do we want to start? Why don't we start, Amy, with you at Northwood? I think you're still on there. If you want to talk a little bit about Northwood and what you're doing for recess, snack, lunches, take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Fred. Yes, so as you mentioned, Northwood has an advantage in not having to transition the lunchroom into a gym PE instruction space, which has been great. We also, you know, if we think of the mitigation strategies that are listed there, or the mitigation influences, we have fewer classes this year than we have had in the last couple of years. So we've got initially a decreased number of classrooms. In addition, we have expanded the space that we use in our in our dining commons, added additional tables. So whereas in non-pandemic times, we had tables kind of from the middle to the end of the space up against the library, and full classes could kind of sit on a set of tables. And we've actually expanded for the full length of that to add more tables in. So we've got more opportunities and more space between tables and between students. We also have historically had, there's kind of a cutout space in our building that is called the Quiet Commons, where we've typically had just a handful of students who just needed a little bit more of a quiet space. This year we've expanded that to be fully part of the lunchroom. And so full classrooms are assigned to be seated in that area, which again gives us more space between kids and more opportunities for tables to spread out and have distance between them. We also have you know, where we used to have 12 to 14-ish kids sitting on a table, we have assigned dots, so specific spaces where kids are allowed to sit, and there's no more than 8 students allowed at a table. Sometimes it's fewer than that. And we also have the folded barriers between, the clear barriers between kids, which provides that extra layer of mitigation. So that's what our lunch looks like. We also have all of the doors. We've got a wall of doors along the side of that space that are open during the course of lunch times. And then in terms of snack, as Fred mentioned, again, our teachers are following those guidelines for creating distance while kids eat snack. Some are having snack within the classroom with distance between kids and everyone facing the same direction. Snacks are 10 minutes or less by design. And then there are many classrooms who are also eating snack outside using the same spaces that we've had in prior years. I'll pass it on to the next person.
Megan, you want to talk about West Mercer?
Yes, good evening, everyone. West Mercer strategies vary a little bit because of the size of our building. We have by a substantial amount the highest student enrollment in the district. And so we expanded some of our options for lunchtime, as some of you know. It was also based on the fact that we did a survey for interest to gauge to see, what our community was interested in. And the West Mercer subset of that data, 70% of the respondents were interested in having an outdoor lunch option. And so when I sent out a West Mercer specific, we had nearly 40% of our students are opted in for the outdoor lunch. So it's still a significant amount who were interested when all said and done, given the limitations that we had for the seating and whatnot, including, just all weather outside. So some of the systems we have in place, as Amy mentioned, in the cafeteria, it's spacious now. We have no more than 8 students at each table as well, using the trifold designs. The outside spaces, we're using 2 undercover areas and are willing to use additional spaces as needed if we have more students who opt into that option. Our snack is the same as Northwood, where it's 10 minutes limited time, 6 feet apart. Teachers can choose whether that's inside or outside of the classroom. And yeah, things have been going really well at our building, and we're doing everything we can to keep our kids healthy and safe and following the guidance that we have available. So thank you, and I'll pass it to David. David, you're muted.
It's late at night. Thank you, Megan. Good evening, everyone. Let's just start with the snack situation. Again, exactly the same as Megan and Amy just shared. Option of eating inside, following all guidelines, or eating outside with a 6-foot distancing for 10 minutes. We have a little different lunch situation. We were able to build a master schedule. And again, because we have fewer students than West, few more students than the other schools, but we were able to build a schedule with 3 lunches. And so we're able to spread the students out 8 per table. The tables are a little bit more spread out. There are some 3 tables per classroom. So when you have less than 24 students in the classroom, students are even able to spread out more. And it is a nice, quiet eating situation. We're making sure that we have flowing lines, that students are quickly able to get their lunches, sit down. Our students are incredible about putting their masks on when they are finished eating. I'm very proud. I think that's true in all of our schools, of that sort of sense of the mask as just a part of the clothing now, and they know when to put their masks back on. We did also, I think we all created a survey. We had about 65% interest from the respondents. We have a little less than half of the families responded. And that really broke down almost a third, interesting enough, in each grade level about an interest of eating outside. The challenge at Island Park about eating outside is our one covered area that appears to be a perfect place right outside the cafeteria is also a major thoroughfare throughout the day of students going in and out of the gym or the cafeteria, a reset, heading out to recess. So when you would have to have perfect timing so that students don't get trampled on. And so it is always a safety issue. And that's something that I'm very cognizant and care about. So I'm still looking at possibilities. I'm exploring ways to do it. I want to do it so that students are safe. I want to do it so that lunch doesn't take up an hour's worth of people's time. And I have to do with the resources that are at our school, which means supervision of students, because during our lunchtime is also recess time. So I have a finite amount of paras. They're doing a great job. Everything's working smoothly now. So I will continue to study the situation and make sure that when we do it, we'll do it right. And we'll make sure that students are enjoying their lunch and healthy. Heidi.
All right, thanks, David, and hello, everybody. I don't have a whole lot to add to all of that. I think my colleagues have covered just about everything at Lakeridge. We have extended our seating in the gym. We're utilizing our stage at this point, and we're spacing just like everybody has already described. We're using the polytrifold dividers. Every single student has a divider except for the ones on the stage because they're further apart, but they do have a divider between them. We have as many people as we can, all hands on deck, monitoring and going through the tables, reminding kids of our four kind of I guess things to do in the lunchroom, and that's mask up, stay put, focus on eating, and mind your distance. And so we're just trying to teach kids and remind kids all the time to mask up as soon as you're done eating, immediately. So if you turn to talk to somebody, put your mask on, those kinds of things, which isn't always front of mind for little kids or even 5th or 4th graders, right? So, but they're doing a phenomenal job at that. Stay put just means to stay seated anytime they're eating, and that applies for snack or the lunchroom, that if you are mask off, you need to stay put in your spot. Teaching them to focus on eating, and that's pretty basic. Just point your face at your food, not at your neighbor, kind of idea when you're unmasked. And then the final thing is minding your distance, just teaching kids to be kind of aware of their bodies in space, wherever they go, and regardless of whether it's lunch, recess, or anything else. So beyond that, I don't have a lot to add. We are continuing to look into the outdoor seating option. I surmise that Lakeridge is maybe possibly most challenged in that area. Our covered area is at the back of the building, which is not, we're estimating that it would take kids about 8 or maybe 10 minutes, depending on what's being served in the lunchroom, to make the trip to get their lunch served and then get out and get seated. And that's regardless of, that doesn't take into account, I forgot my fork. I need to go back to the lunchroom. Also, our covered area it's pretty small. I don't have the number that we could seat out there right off the top of my head. I apologize for that, but it is very small, and it's also on a slope. And that's something that I think people need to understand, is that our covered area is on a slope. So it is most of the year has some form of wet pavement from runoff from the slope, or puddles form there with the slightest amount of weather. So that's one of our big challenges. We do, of course, have a large blacktop area where the portables used to be back when we had more portables here at Lakeridge. However, we don't have the staffing right now to spread out. We are stretched very, very thin, like Fred described, when we're trying to run a lunch and supervise a recess. It takes everybody, plus we have myself or my assistant principal, Jill. We've been in the lunchroom every single day and plan to stay there to help with supervision. So we really are open to, we'll keep exploring, we'll keep looking at our options and keep trying. But right now we're not able to offer that. And we don't really need to. So our gym capacity to seat students is right about 206 students. We can seat about 176 on the gym floor and 30 comfortably on the stage. And so we haven't had the need to extend beyond that yet. So, all right.
Thank you, Heidi. A reminder too, at each of the schools, as Amy mentioned, the doors are open, and Lakeridge has 4 sets of doors, double doors that are open pretty much all day, from what I can tell.
Yeah. It's pretty windy in there. Yeah. We're gonna need people to bring coats in a few days, I think. So yeah, all 4 doors are open all the time.
So we're going to move on now to the next question, which has been about masks at recess. I'm going to ask Erin to start this out because, again, she has really been the expert on culling through the Department of Health guidance in writing our COVID response plan. So Erin, would you start off?
Yeah, just want to thank our principals too, since I have the opportunity for all of their work in terms of really following the guidance and taking that tool to make our schools at all times as safe as possible, given our resources. And then we truly have been following our guidance and the guidance of the Department of Health. And as said before, you know, the DOH has set that as the guidance for schools to be safe given the pandemic, looking specifically at K-12 schools. So following guidance does mean that we are being safe. Failure to exceed guidance doesn't mean that we are unsafe. So I just want to highlight that, but also hats off to those principals for doing a phenomenal job with making kids feel welcome and also ensuring their safety. But with respect to masks, there's been a lot of questions because there was a change just last week, or I guess it officially took place or on, what was it, Tuesday? Tuesday, where it used to be at the very start of school was that no masks were required outside for anyone, irrespective of age or vaccination status. That shifted on last Tuesday per governor's orders so that it was masks are required in gatherings of 500 or more, which is why you did see the shift by the school district at the first football game the last Friday. So now at large gatherings defined as 500 or more, masks are required irrespective of vaccination status. However, during the school day, masks are not required outdoors regardless of vaccination status or age. However, they are highly recommended for unvaccinated people in crowded spaces where they can't distance from those who are not in their household for sustained amounts of time. So what that means for recess is that masks really are not required. We do encourage our students, especially at the elementary level, to wear masks outside because they are unvaccinated. And when there are times when they are in close proximity to each other, we have our lunch or our recess supervisors are going around and reminding students to put on masks if they happen to not already be wearing masks. But I really want to turn it over to our principals to describe what they are seeing on the playground, because I think many people will be surprised to realize how many students are in fact wearing masks, and highlight, if you would, sort of where students can take mask breaks if they are choosing to wear masks at recess.
Sure. I'll just start by saying I think we've kind of contacted one another over the course of the school year to check in and see how it's going. And the vast majority of kids are wearing masks consistently on the playground. It'd probably be in the 98 to 99% of our kids are regularly wearing masks for the entire time. If they do want to take a mask break, they just move to a space where there aren't other kids around them. And in the outdoors, there's lots of that available to them and take a quick mask break. But again, most kids are masks on. In those cases, as Erin referred to, where kids are choosing to not wear a mask, they have been, at least in my experience, very receptive that if a supervisor or a principal sees them engaging in an activity that is likely to bring them closer than 3 feet to their peers, they're prompted to put their mask back on, and they respond right away. So I think that our kids are doing a great job with making those choices and following that strong recommendation.
If any of our other elementaries want to weigh in, I think they're all agreeing. I know with my observations, which are mainly at Northwood, I always say I don't have a favorite, but it's an awful nice walk to take to go down and see kids. And even on the hill, which is one of the favorite places at Northwood for the littles. I didn't see anyone rolling yet, Amy, but they were certainly playing on the hill the last time I was kind of watching them. And they were far more than 6 feet apart, and they were masked. It was just part of, I think as someone said earlier, their clothing. The kids are used to it. It's just what they know to do now. Anything to add, Erin?
No, but really, again, hats off to this group and also those at the middle school and high school, because there are opportunities for students there to also be outside. And we've been students have been very receptive to prompts to put masks on when they are getting closer to each other. But by and large, they're just wearing masks most of the time unless they are eating. So that also is hats off to our parents and our community for being responsible. Clearly, they are getting that from home, and that's being supported here in school. So thank you to our community parents as well.
So another question that we've had asked a lot is about either surveillance testing or testing large groups of staff and students. And are we participating in the Learn to Return program? Yes, we are, and we have been, frankly, since it was first instituted. But Fred and our nurses are the experts on that, so I'm going to have Fred go through this slide.
We have been a Learn to Return district. We were one of the early districts to reach out, and as early as last spring, actually, we had the Binax Now rapid antigen testing in all 6 of our schools. We actually ordered more tests to begin this school year, so that we have a very healthy supply of testing. Right now, we are testing in athletics, in some athletic sports and activities. An example is our football team for our unvaccinated student athletes who are testing on a regular basis. That's an example of something that when we looked into the guidance from July, coupled it together with the guidance from August, seemed to be the best thing to do to make sure that we're not only keeping our athletes safe and healthy, but we're also thinking about those who we're competing against as we're going forward. We're also offering the Binax Now testing for all of our symptomatic staff and students. We're offering it as a, when people are just concerned and they would like to check and or to help students when they're returning back to school and participating. There is a combination that they go through using the PCR testing. That's obviously much more reliable, but the Binax Now adds another added layer of support. And lastly, when we're thinking about students returning to school, as I mentioned earlier, there's kind of different levels and ways that students can return. And some of that, as you might have even heard in the news, has to do with the test to return protocols. Those have not been defined exactly, but they are permitted. We have done some test to return protocols where even when students have been able to come back, we've continued to do some testing based on some unique situations. And that's allowed students to get back into school and continue to feel that they are continue to be COVID-free. So the other question then is, why aren't we doing the diagnostic testing where we are testing all of our unvaccinated students? One of the primary reasons is some of that language is put in there largely for communities that didn't have access to testing. We have great availability to testing in our community. It's something that is available. It's something that can be turned around in short time. The Learn to Return testing actually sometimes takes 48 to 72 hours to get the results back, when one of our students could just go down, get used to the King County availability and actually have those results in 12 to 24 hours. And so the overall use of that, especially as we're starting to think about our schools, is something we will continue to contemplate. If that feels like that's a mitigating measure that we should be using, we can always adjust to that. But at least at this point, we're not seeing tremendous need and that return on the investment to do that in terms of making sure that we're testing all of them. Plus the Binax Now, there are there's certainly some evidence that it's not always the most reliable. And so if we rely on any one thing too much, we let our guard down somewhere else, and we don't want to put it all in one place. So we'll continue to use the Binax Now in a targeted approach. We will continue to monitor to see if the diagnostic testing is what would be most appropriate. But even the Department of Health at this point, again, we're talking to them very regularly. They have been very pleased and supportive of our mitigation strategies here on Mercer Island today.
So as someone who tested negative on the rapid, when I was actually positive on the PCR, I'm a little concerned too, but it's what Department of Health says. But my question is, if a student can't get to a King County site, is the district offering assistance to get there for a PCR test?
So is your question, if a student is unable to transport themselves to a place where they can get a PCR test, would we support that?
Yeah.
Yes, we would.
It does not come up.
It hasn't been an issue to date, but if that were to occur, we would ensure that a student would get the appropriate test to return to school as soon as possible. Because again, our priority is to keep our kids in school and ensure they're safe and healthy.
So we have one last slide on everything to do with reopening, and then we have one slide that Ty is going to take on enrollment. So just a reminder, we will continue to evolve and adapt our practices as we have over the past 20 months. Is there going to be new Department of Health or Public Health Seattle King County guidance? Who knows? Sometimes we get kind of the word a couple of days before that, oh, it's coming out, and we, along with everyone else, call through it, see what the big changes are. If there's something really dramatic, we make that immediately. Referencing back to the football game, that didn't have to happen until Tuesday, but we made the determination, and our administrative staff at the high school did a fabulous job of pivoting quickly. It was like a 12-hour decision. We made it Friday morning, and Friday night, everyone masks were mandated. Are students having to be quarantined? What is the length of that? Is their learning being impacted? What are the conditions in the community? That was mentioned earlier today that we do have a very high vaccination rate. Frankly, our 12-year-olds and up is a very high percentage. King County has a higher percentage than many other counties. So that is one of the factors that we do look at, as well as Fred mentioning the access to testing in our region is very accessible. So we continue on our plan, do, study, act, cycle. I do apologize that this slide deck was not on the agenda. We were literally still working on it at 5 o'clock this evening, but we will make sure it gets posted, and it will get posted on our website as well. So folks will be able to see it. But there were some questions related to enrollment, and wow, that was interesting. What happened there? Are you ready, Todd? Do you have a mic?
Yes, everybody hear me? Great. So enrollment, we ended the year, the 20-21 school year at roughly, it was 4,074 students. As we were coming into the summer months, we were starting to receive enrollments from families. Students were coming in. We saw our kindergarten numbers spike. We saw our first graders spike. And then as we started getting into the first day of school and started seeing the whites of their eyes, as we've been cleaning up those records, we've been finding that we've had a significant number of families off the island. At minimum, we've lost 37 students to moving. The families haven't moved off.
And the moves have, a lot of them have actually been out of the state, definitely out of the region. Some of them have been international. I remember someone telling me they were speaking with a family in Canada the other day because they had moved back to there. So just as with all the other reasons, the pandemic has made people very mobile in that their working conditions have changed, and so they're able to have that privilege of being able to move somewhere else.
Additionally, the number of students that we had believed would be coming back from private schools did not materialize in the numbers that we had hoped for. And it's the level of demand for fully online. There are still families that have desired that, but not at the numbers that we were able to financially support due to the funding that we received from fully online programs. So those families have also withdrawn and have signed up for programs like LAVA and So at this point, we've slipped below projections for enrollment. We will continue to monitor it. We don't have an official count yet. That happens a little bit later. But as we've been cleaning up the records and seeing the whites of their eyes, we have dipped below projection. Just because it's a lot of families that move. It's gone in the area. So we will continue to monitor trends. We'll continue to look at where we're going with enrollment, and we should be projecting enrollment.
Just a couple of noticings that we've had in the short time we've been in school. As you remember from the spring, Ty was talking about kindergarten and how it was difficult to project. Right now, as we stand, he's within 1. So the kindergarten projection was actually one of the stronger projections. First grade actually came in higher. We did add a little bit to first grade, thinking that some of the students who stayed home last year would come back in first grade, but that grew even more than projection. Our junior and senior class are fuller than our projections. So we have some digging into data to look at the grades that really didn't make projections, which really is 2nd through 10th at this time. So that's, I know that was a lot. And if you have any questions, we are here to answer them. Question? No?
I just add in that, if I recall correctly, so we did not receive enrollment stabilization for apportionment in our general fund. However, our levy is stabilized, so we'll be able to use 2019-20 enrollment numbers for that, and transportation has been kind of stabilized through a specific formula. So
For the 20-21 school year, so last school year, we did receive enrollment stabilization. That was a 1 year only. We got that for 1 year. Levy stabilization came in. They said you can use your ending enrollment for 2019. So June of 2019, we took that number, plug it in. That's what we can collect off of. That's, the 280 students higher than where we were. So we're taking care of for this year for levy. Transportation is going to be the higher of 19-20 school year funding or your current funding. So we are also going to be pretty squared away for transportation this year. But again, these are all 1 year items.
Thank you. Tam, did you have a question?
Hi, with the parents that were in high school, did the school district reach out to them to ask what were their concerns and what would it take for them to come down?
That work is done at the site levels where they do, they query parents that aren't coming back. Some who left us last year wouldn't have even done RSVP, so we wouldn't have had contact with them this year to say, why aren't you returning? Because they weren't in our records.
I think it's always good, when their parents are leaving for high school and they're still on the item, if we're intentional of addressing some of the concerns moving forward. And I know that actually parents are leaving, just like when they enroll, it's similar when people leave, it's similar kind of like enrolling in private schools, right? If Mercer Island is not a place that they feel comfortable in, then they would move to a place that is that school district. So I would also kind of keep, see if we can keep the part that data as well. So that part of it is, after moving forward, enrollment is a big concern. And because it's tied to budget, it's tied to making sure that we have enough resources to maintain. And so how do we ensure that we keep the confidence of the community and, address their concerns and be proactive? And so having those data from the parents who left is always, like exit interviews is always one of the best to speak forward. I also have questions about,
Okay, actually, sorry, wait, can I just comment, chime in on that before you add more questions to it? Just at least anecdotally, like the families that are moving away right now, it has a lot more to do with COVID and with people wanting to go back and be with their families or like their job change or whatever. I'm very familiar with the phenomenon that you're talking about of people leaving the district for other reasons, but I don't know that that's something that the administration has bandwidth for doing right now. Like, so I'm just kind of throwing it back to the board to say, like, is that something that the board wants to ask for example, like doing exit interviews with the families that haven't come back, or I guess that post interviews with the families that left last year because of COVID that haven't come back. Like, I'm just curious whether other people think that that's something that's worth doing right now.
But don't we do exit interviews as a norm?
All of the families will receive a survey from me on, it will go on Monday. Giovanna just pulled all the numbers, and then we provide that as an update to you as part of OE reporting in December. So you'll get that report based on, what those were. A lot of times the families will let the registrars know, and we log that into Skyward in terms of why a student or a family may have left. But we do that as part of our regular monitoring. I survey them in September, and that captures everyone from February 1 to August 31 who left. And then I do it again in January, and then in February, and that covers everyone from September 1 to January 31. So we do those surveys.
Okay, so that's already.
So just make sure that that's our process.
It's part of one of the monitoring reports.
Yeah, and so how do we use that information? Yeah, right. Because to hear that it keeps dipping down is a concern for me.
I do want to remind the board that pre-pandemic, our projections for our enrollment was for a decline. We knew that based on the work from our demographer, Les Kendrick, as well as Ty's work, that we were going to be declining. Yes, it has been at a more pronounced rate than we projected, but I do want to remind that was in there as well. And we are digging into the data. There's some interesting pieces that Ty and I were discussing this afternoon, and maybe Director Lurie can help us a little bit, that we noticed that there was a private school in Israel that a fair amount of our high schoolers had opted to go to, and that was where the students were going. And so it was a curiosity for us because we hadn't seen that many at a single time. And then we had the question was, is it for the whole year? Is it for just a semester? So those kinds of anomalies, I think some of that does have to do with pandemic and people taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, I can tell you at least the program that you're talking about, which is phenomenal. Some kids go for 8 weeks, some kids go for a semester, and they have to unenroll from Mercer Island in order to enroll, because it's through community college credits at Florida by chance. And so in order to get credit there, they have to unenroll there, but then they return here, get the credits to transfer and re-register.
It's the same with parents who were anxious about coming back in person, who wanted to go to a full virtual school. They had to unenroll. We anticipate that come semester, when vaccines are available for our 5 to 11-year-olds, that we hope that some may transition back if they feel more comfortable.
Cam, you had a couple other questions, so I didn't mean to like.
No, you're all good, so we can finish that.
Yeah,
thank you. And just, I know that we talked about how our priority is to make sure that students stay in school, and so I understand that, and of course, we all want that. But for me, during this time, safe is a relative word. DOH make guidelines based on certain risks that they are willing to take versus families taking risks for their kids. And so for kids who have to be quarantined, or their siblings who may not fit the requirement for quarantine, but they're concerned, right? Or we don't think they need to be quarantined, but because they were in that classroom, they feel like they're quarantined. So during this time, like, how can we be flexible to make sure that, because during this time where we keep throwing, well, this is what DOH says, this is the policy, that's going to be the surest way to get frustration, because we can't argue safe, right? So how can we, make sure that during this time we are reflecting, understand it's a pandemic, and that we are flexible to meet the needs of the parents as much as possible so that they can do feel safe. Because we can't really guarantee saying that we need DOH that they're safe. So that's kind of, and then tied to that, once they're quarantined and I love the fact that you have worked so hard with MIEA to get really clear timelines of when to provide instructional materials. What is our process to ensure that students who are quarantined for a week or multiple times throughout the year, how do we ensure that their learning, is where they should be? And how can we, so that in the later part, how can we make sure that we provide them extra support along the way? So I'm thinking of, are we flexible in the weekends, and then how do we make sure that we capture potential, learning?
So I heard two questions there. Erin is going to address the first one with your concerns about relative safetiness of Department of Health, and then Fred will talk about the assessment for learning. Go ahead, Erin. Are you guys okay with the mic? Or do you need them?
So to answer your question, Director Din, you sort of highlighted one of the problems that our administrators are facing every day, which is my definition of safe is X as a parent. My definition of safe is Y as a parent. Or parent B is now saying, I don't want your imposition of what you think is safe on my child, which is one of the reasons why we do have to default to the Department of Health guidance, because that is their job. They are steeped in the science, they are in the trenches, they are looking at K-12 schools, and they are guiding us on what is safe by an objective standard. Because if we had to meet the definition of safe of the 4,500 families in this district, or 4,000 families in this district, it would be an untenable task. So while we try to be flexible, we try to explain the rationale behind the guidance and the mitigation strategies we have, and we are trying to be as transparent as possible given the privacy interests in not identifying students who are COVID positive, etc. We do need to, we cannot change our approach based on the individuals we talk to. We can hear them and we do listen. And some of that does result in a shift in our approach because it bears out to be in the best interest of students. But we have to look at the guidance that is written from the Department of Health, and then look at the resources that we have. And it's also, as our principals highlighted, the site-specific limitation, to then see how we can make it as safe as possible while still meeting all of the guidance. So we meet the guidance across the district, and in some cases we do exceed it, but we do have to rely on the guidance as sort of our baseline, and that we are working off of. Because if we had to change based on other people's definition of what is safe, that is a challenge. Now, our job, which is a tough one in the middle of the pandemic, is try to make people feel comfortable and trust that the Department of Health guidance is grounded in science and that we are in fact following it, which is why we are having presentations like this today. I know the principals have invited parents out. I have been invited to question and answer sessions, to speak with parents, our nurses, and we are very, very fortunate to have a nurse in every school, are working with the staff and with our parents to answer questions when they have them. If a student is a close contact or potential close contact, our nurses and administrators are well versed in what the protocols are and what the risks are and how we are approaching it, so they can answer those questions. So we are trying to approach it as a system, so we have as many resources available as possible. And again, I think it helps us versus some other districts that we have a community who has taken this, has taken it upon themselves to, as individuals and as families, to do what they can to address to mitigate against the risk of COVID-19. We are very fortunate that we have a highly, despite now we will have a fully vaccinated staff with it, unless there are some that need exemptions, but we were not even at risk, where some schools are at risk of not being able to staff their schools on October 18th, which is the requirement for all school district staff to be vaccinated. We have a highly vaccinated staff and we have a highly vaccinated community. And that helps keep us safe. I also am aware that by and large, like just if you look at our kids on the playground, they are wearing masks. When you look at that football game, we pivoted from not having to wear masks on a Thursday night to by Friday the football game, everyone wearing masks. We showed up there and I was at the gate. Some of you may have seen me. We had, 800 cloth masks to give out and we gave out 110, right? So because people showed up with their masks and most of the ones we gave out were some were to guests and some were because, oh, my thing broke because they had a disposable mask. But we didn't have to be the mask police in our community. So we do have to give credit to our community for that. But in terms of making our kids feel safe, it's making them understand how things like hand washing help keep them safe. And we have our teachers who are doing a very good job of explaining that to kids. So I don't know if that answers your first question. Your second question really was, I think, did that answer your first question?
No, I'm fully into the science as a researcher. I understand that DOH is grounded in science is the baseline that we should follow. I'm asking for how do we think about, because right now, if we don't identify someone as close contact, then they're not allowed to be quarantined. And if they choose to, and then they will get an unexcused absence. It has huge implications for like middle school kids or whatever, and then they might feel they have to go to school when they don't feel safe. And so I think that's traumatic as well. And so then as we're thinking more, and I love some of the principal was saying that how do we continue to explore about, recognizing that we are following the system, the guidance, but the reality is this is how our community is feeling. And so how do we make sure that our system, is not punitive to those that are making decisions? Because when we push them to a point, they will make a different decision, right? To whether to go to school or go to another school. So I'm just thinking about how can we be flexible as a system for people who are choosing, kind of like if I hear somebody in my son's school class is sick, but then he's not identified as close contact.
But we do also have to maintain confidentiality. That is a big part of the work in contact
Yeah,
tracing.
we're not telling people about who it is, but people know if like, 3 kids in one classroom is close contact because they ate together, but then the other one, it's a small community. So I'm just thinking about the ramifications of those who may choose to quarantine themselves for a couple of days, but we haven't identified them as needing to.
So those would be absences. The parent would call them in as absences. It wouldn't necessarily fall in the quarantine by virtue of COVID. The MOU is very specific on that as to when the live streaming is available to students. So someone who chooses on their own accord to quarantine, then it becomes an absence, which we have always dealt with over time as to how students are supported in their learning for those absences. I hear your concern, but we also have to look at the other side of, we also deal with families, as Erin was pointing out, all the different varieties of saying, I don't want my kid to mask at all. So if we start manipulating where we're going to stand on the Department of Health guidance, we're going to land in a place of trying to have every letter of the alphabet in a plan versus a consistency that everyone knows what the plan is and knows how that's going to work. We will certainly have flexibility at each school site for individual students, but that conversation really needs to start at the school site. I don't think we as a district-wide can say, here's plan A, B, C, all the way up through Z, but we can refer people back to their site administrator, their counselor, have that conversation as to how can we better support you as an individual. But we do have certain stipulations that our MOU requires and the DOH guidance requires.
And I do want to emphasize, just following up on that, if parents make choices with respect to their students being out for a couple of days or whatever it may be, because they're concerned, we have very committed educators. And it would be an absence like other absences, and they will support those students because they don't want students to be behind either. But they will just support them the way they have always done versus the streaming or recording option. So it's not as if you choose to keep your kid out for your own reasons and your own assessment that no one is going to contact your student. I have faith in our educators and in our principals and our site teams to work with families. And as a person who's had students who have to stay out for various lengths of time, and the teachers pre-COVID and in COVID worked with the students, make sure they stayed in touch. It's just that extra option, which is streaming and recording access, is not a guarantee for those who are not identified as being quarantined.
I wanted to just say thank you to everyone that presented tonight, especially to the elementary school principals if they're still on there.
We let them go.
Oh, we let them go. Okay, never mind. We can watch this later. But I do think that this amount of communication is really helpful. So thank you for kind of addressing all the questions that have been coming in. And I think that for parents right now, we normally, I mean, I have an elementary school age kid, right? I would normally be all over that school, right? Like I'd be in the classroom and I'd be like coming in for lunch and I'd be, stopping by during the day to just say hi, kind of, not to the kid, but to like the staff and stuff. And right now, because of COVID, like we can't come in as volunteers, right? Like I'm not going to be able to come in and sit and have lunch with my kid ever, And so I think the more we hear and see about how things are being handled at each individual school and how different those solutions are, I think that's very, very helpful as a parent to like be reassured.
We are working on those volunteer protocols. There is the requirement for the vaccination status of that as well, just like there is every year when volunteers have to apply to be a volunteer and go through that process. We're working on that. We don't have it, fully up and going yet. It is only the first week of school, but we do hope to have it by, Aaron, you were thinking the beginning of October for the volunteers.
That's all right.
Yeah, so it's for people who are interested in volunteering, contact your school, get the form filled out, get the documentation turned in, because we will be having volunteers back in our schools. Yes, everyone will be masked. Yes, we will, want you to make sure you're following all the mitigation strategies, but we love our volunteers and want them back in our schools.
And I do want to emphasize, just since this is a public forum, that volunteers are also, as of October 18th, required to be vaccinated in order to volunteer or fall within the exemption. If a volunteer is seeking exemption, they will actually be processed through me as head of HR, just because HR is doing that work for staff, so it is well versed on how to sort of go through that iterative process. But otherwise, you'll have to submit your COVID-19 vaccination information, and on the website under the volunteer resources, there is a form to do that where you can directly upload your vaccine evidence of vaccination, which will have to be verified before you're eligible to volunteer in the school. And to be clear, those who are required to demonstrate vaccination status is not parents. So if you're coming in as a parent to participate in like a parent-teacher conference or pick up your kid, you do not need to verify that you're vaccinated. This is people who are volunteering and doing some sort of work function. So it's volunteers and vendors, and the distinction is that you're doing some sort of defined task or work for the school. It's not in your parent role. So there was some confusion with parents thinking that they weren't going to be able to come to conferences and what have you if they weren't vaccinated, and that is not the case. So I just want to clarify that. And we will we'll keep that information confidential, though we do need to share with the site that you have met the requirements. And we will potentially have to share it with the Department of Health should we be going through a contact tracing situation.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Deborah.
Can I, just not to beat a dead horse, but we live in a really small, tight community, and word and rumors travel very quickly. And I just can't emphasize enough how much transparency helps. When my family got COVID, including my daughter who was at the high school the day that she tested positive, we let everyone know immediately. They knew who it was. We're all vaccinated. There's nothing to be embarrassed or shamed about. This is a virus. You don't get to pick whether or not you're going to get it. And we took all the precautions we could. I'm going to assume that everyone else in this community is doing the same. If you let people know, then they don't have to worry. They can just make decisions for themselves. My husband gave it to me and my daughter. And then one other person we spent a lot of time working out with, Joey and I passed it to no one, 0, because we let everyone know when they got tested. And then therefore they didn't pass it to anyone. So transparency and communicate, and we're all in this together, and we will not get out of it unless we work together. So please, let's try and cut down on rumors, assuming that intent of people. I know the high schoolers, I know there's a couple of cases that popped up where whether it was through sports or not, but they all know who they are. No one's pointing fingers. They just know whether or not they've had close contact, and it helps so then they can keep an eye on themselves and in order to protect others. So let's just all take a deep breath and get through this together.
Thank you. David and Brian, do you have anything to add before we move on?
Thank you, Deborah, for that sage advice. I think that's great. I'd like to echo Mandy Ty's thanks for the questions that have been answered. I was checking them off, and you really did hit them all. So thank you very much. That was a great deal of hard work, so most appreciated. And then regarding the enrollment, I know as a board we had consensus that we should push for a little bit higher number on enrollment expectations. So I just so that we don't unnecessarily reduce staff and other things like that. So I appreciate we are falling short from that, but it is also worth acknowledging that the board did put some pressure to stay at the higher end of projections. So thank you for that, and thank you for the transparency. My only question here regarding the COVID issues is we currently tell kids if you've got a cold or flu-like symptoms to not come to school. How does that fit into the quarantine and the missing school issues? And we're going to help these kids get back up to speed as if they missed a day of school. I'm presuming that kids shouldn't worry about this.
Absolutely. If you are ill, stay home. We're reiterating with those families and those students to keep them on track, keep them moving forward, making sure they get the support and help they need. Even if someone is quarantined, or even if someone has COVID, if they're too ill to live stream, we don't expect them to live stream if they're sick. And we don't expect them to sit at home if they're ill and be worried about what work they're missing. We'll give them the support and the wraparound services when they get back to help them move on and move forward with their education. We know that is another mitigation strategy. It's one of those layers. If you're sick, stay home. We're saying it to staff. I happened to be at a school today that was having to do some contact tracing, and the parent, frankly, had done it absolutely right. Had kept the student home yesterday because they had a symptom, decided they would test. It was positive, immediately contacted the school. And so that started the whole contact tracing. But they abided by the advice of if you're ill, if you have any of the symptoms, stay home. We were really grateful for that and thanked the parent, and went on to figure out contact tracing for someone who maybe doesn't even know all the other kids in the class yet. So it has challenges, but we are really continuing to reinforce that.
Did you look like you wanted to say something, Erin? No, that was like an auction, when you like scratch your head. I also wanted to put in a plug for people getting flu shots and helping their families to get flu shots, because this is going to be a nasty flu season, I think. And having just recently experienced having a cold myself and all of the kind of cascading of effects of that, because you have to err on the side of caution. So you can't go to your in-person meetings, you have to stay home. You might keep your kids home for a day if they seem just a tiny bit off, like I was it was my first experience of being sick at all since the start of COVID. And so I was like, wow, it's no small thing now to just have a, stuffy nose. So. Okay, do we need a little bit of, oh, sorry, Brian, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was just gonna add a bit of perspective as well with all of this. So terms like quarantine and close contact, these terms have definitions to them. They're defined terms. So it's not up to describe yourself as in quarantine or whatever. If you need to keep your child home or stay home yourself because you're not feeling well or you're having symptoms, then do that, get a test and follow the protocol. If you have questions about that, reach out to the nurse. We're a local control state, but there are a whole lot of laws and policies that we must comply with in order to maintain our school district and being open to receive our apportionment. So when it comes to attendance, when it comes to educational hours, when it comes to these staff's expectations, these are set at the state level and then go down to our educational services districts, and then they come down to the individual districts. And then within that, the district has some wiggle room to, in some cases, be more specific, in some cases be a little bit looser, but we have to comply to the state laws and policies. And we can't choose not to do that. And that includes our insurance carriers. In order to be insured and to be protected, we have to meet certain qualifications. And so I think it's important for everybody to keep in mind that this is all of these protocols and things are so much bigger than this district, that the district is trying to comply to that from the administrative level down to 8 facilities across the district, to those specific administrators of those facilities, into the teachers and everything. If you have a question or concern, reach out to your teacher, reach out to your school nurse, reach out to the first immediate person for a solid answer on that. Provide feedback to your site administrators. They're far more agile than the district administration. Even though the district administration is as agile as they can be, they're far more agile than the school board can be. We only meet twice a month where we can actually make a decision or take action. So while it's always good for the 5 of us to know what's happening and to know what people are feeling, we can't take action on that as a body. The only people who can take action on that are the administrative teams at the central office and your administrative teams at your specific facility and your teacher, right? So I think it's important for folks to keep all of that in mind. It's an incredibly complex system that is changing and evolving at a rate infinitely faster than it typically does. And public education is a system that is always in a state of change. So people just need to, I just ask that folks assume best intent, reach out to the very next person if you need help or assistance or need something to be explained to you, and work the problem from that solution up. It's a time of, again, I said this over a year ago, it's a global pandemic. We don't have the control that we typically do in our lives. There are a lot of unknowns and there is no guarantee of safety. So we each have to do what's best for our family, for our children, for ourselves as we navigate this system. But if there's one thing I have absolute confidence in, is that if folks enroll their children in this school district and they entrust their children to these educators and these staff members, that these folks are going to do everything they can to mitigate risk and do the best they can by those students. I've never doubted that, and I'm absolutely positive that now. There are going to be cases. It's going to happen. It's a risk that we have to take on in order to work in this system. But we're also under a governor's mandate that we absolutely have no choice, but we must offer full-time, in-person education to every child who shows up on our doorstep and asks for it. And we have to do that within the scientific guidance that is provided by the other agencies that we work with. So there's a lot of ifs and wanderings and musings and things. And I think at a certain point, people have to understand that this is a system. And sometimes it can be a fairly rigid system when it comes to compliance. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that. I would like to have a 5-minute break before we dive into the rest of tonight's agenda, because we have only just gotten through the superintendent's report. There's a lot still to go. So can we take a break now and reconvene at 7:46? 5 minutes, is that enough? Or you can do one more? 5? Okay, thank you.
If you've forgotten, the restrooms are out the door to the left and around the corner. And if your water needs more, there's a water cooler over there.
Okay, we are back. Thank you, everyone. We are moving on to the next section of tonight's meeting, which is partial governance process monitoring. And the first topic on the table is Board Policy 1800 OE11, facilities and capital assets, capital projects / technology and transportation levies.
So continuing the conversation from the study session as to the timeline for levies, Ty is going to go through a slide deck that kind of defines and gives some bullet points for each of the 3 levies. And then he'll explain the second document here. It is specific to the transportation levy, and hopefully it provides some clarification. We did put this as action discussion, so if the board did decide they had something they wanted to do in thought exchange and wanted to take action tonight, you would be able to do that. But it's really, again, for that discussion.
Andrews, are you?
Give me 1 second. I'll get it queued up.
All right. So we have 3 levies that we run. This in the state of Washington, school districts are authorized to run 3 separate distinct levies. Those levies are the enrichment levy, the capital projects and technology levy, and the transportation levy. And the slide deck tonight really is kind of more of the first blush public document. Here's what we're going to be doing, open public discussion for what we're looking at. So if we can move down, we're going to talk about what the enrichment levy is, what our capital plan looks like for the next levy. Very high level description. You've already gotten documents from Brandy and Tony about what the deep dive is, but for public consumption, they don't even necessarily know all about every boiler that we're looking at, and which buildings are using carpet at this point. It is available if you want, but we know how exciting that is. We're going to look at a little bit at the high level technology plan. Andrews is still in the process of developing the technology plan. And he's doing a phenomenal job at it, but kind of taking a look at what's coming in this cycle. We actually had a phenomenal conversation about it this morning, talking about the different levies. So this is, we went back 2 levy cycles. So what we're back to 2010. The levy in 2010 was very equipment intensive, a lot of physical technology. This last levy in 2016 was, we still had some technology stuff that we did, expanding 101 iPads, the Promethean boards, but it was much more people intensive, like, focusing and really honing in on what the technology instructional coaches work on. The building technology specialists and being more people focused. Unfortunately, everything has a life cycle, so we're moving back to more of a technology intensive plan coming up. And then those 3 slides, those sections are going to be fairly quick, fairly standard. The one that we do need more guidance on is the transportation plan. We've had some great conversations about what we've been thinking, and we do have some options to think about. In terms of if we want to run a levy now, how do we want to structure it, and how do we want to go forward? And then I projected out rates for the different levies, looking at how much per 1,000 of assessed value each of these different options would look at, and then just some general considerations. So we can go to the enrichment levy. Enrichment levies can work on a 2 to 4 year cycle. It depends on what the board decides, the community decides. We run 4 year cycles pretty much consistently. Why go to the voters when you don't necessarily need to? The enrichment levy, it's been used to supplement basic education, apportionment and expand services in the district. We use it to support our athletics, the Secretary of Day, smaller class sizes, our specialists. And we use it 38% of our special education budget is supported out of our levy. So it's incredibly important to the district, to making sure that we have consistent services provided for students. The levy formula adjusted for inflation, it's $2,700 per student. Based on the enrollment at the end of the previous year, that becomes our authority for the next calendar year. When McCleary came in 2017, our levy authority went from 16.8 million down to 11.5. So it took a huge hit. It hasn't really changed much because of we're an incredibly property rich district. If we were to run on the property side, it would be in the upwards of 20-25 million, which is a significant jump. But we are at the per student level. And then the proposed amounts that we asked the board to tentatively give us some proposal permissions around would allow us to have flexibilities for not only adjusting enrollment, but also adjusting for increases in property or decreases in property rates. We asked the board a couple weeks ago in the study session, your comfort level about going out with a $12 million levy. That would allow us flexibility for enrollment adjustments. That will also allow us flexibility for any legislative adjustments. If we have that authority, we don't have to run a supplemental levy. A supplemental levy is when the legislature comes in and says, great, you were at $1.50, you're at 2,700 now, move it up to 3,000. We would have to go back to the voters in another election to get a supplemental levy approved, which is a hassle and it's risky politically. By going out at 12 million, we will be collecting about 11.5. So whatever we don't need just gets rolled back automatically by the assessor's office. So we will only request what we need. Any questions about the enrichment levy?
Real quickly, we mentioned the school nurses and the mental health counselors. Do they come out of this levy or?
Yeah.
The extra ones that are above and beyond the prototypical school model.
Okay.
So, you're still answering that last question? No, we were gonna move on, but.
So is 12 million enough buffer if the legislature increases what we can get? It just doesn't seem like.
I'm trying to be conservative. I don't want to go out to the voters and say, let's go for a 12.75 million ask every year when we only need 11.5. It doesn't feel great to me, knowing that we have to have these huge differences based on that. But at 12 million gives us some flexibility. It gives us opportunity to recapture some of that without having to go for it. Plus, if something does happen, it's only a couple of years before we can go back. And if it does exceed the 12 million, if there was some legislative adjustment that does exceed, then we could go back to a conversation saying about a supplemental levy. And do we want to run it?
But we don't collect what we can't.
Yeah.
Either can't or don't need, right?
Yeah.
Technically, we don't need,
Yeah.
but what we can't use, right? So even if we went in at 12.5 or 12.75, we can only collect up to 11.5 right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's very OSPI and the King County Assessor, we're all very tied in together about what levy authority looks like, and it's very concretely established and tied together. Actually, in next month in October, as we're passing the ballot resolution, we also need to pass our levy certification. So for the 22 category, so that will firmly establish for the assessors what we can collect in 20.
Just tagging on to what Director Lurie was saying. So the Directors Association continues to advocate for $3 per thousand of assessed value or $3,000 per student, which Seattle already has. So the state legislature has already moved somewhat in that direction, and we continue to press along with others in the alphabet soup of associations to press that up to 3,000 per student. So would the potential levy cover that increase?
Yeah. I mean, if we're looking at 3,000 per student or 3,000 per student, and we have 4,000 students, that's $12 million. Granted, we're slightly over 4,000, but it would get us to a point where we can collect everything we need to at that point, and then if there needs to be discussion about supplemental, we can go for supplemental. But I think 12 million is a pretty sufficient ask.
That seems very reasonable, especially during a time of pandemic when there's lots of possibility for needing additional funding just for basic services because we don't know what's coming down the line the next year. So
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, capital projects. So capital projects is run, so capital and technology, we often talk about them separately, but it is one levy. We bring together two separate plans, a capital plan and a technology plan, but it is one levy. They sit in one fund and they both operate on the same 6-year cycle. So when we're talking about these two separate items, it's really gonna be the same ballot issue. As we're looking at this next 6-year cycle, we're going to need to seriously consider the increase of construction costs. I mean, from the initial quotes for the modular building for the pathway program, I'm glad I remember that. It was me, good job. It's no longer ATP adult transition program, it's pathways. Even within the last year, construction costs have gone up roughly 20%. So we can anticipate additional increase in costs as we move forward. And because it's a 6-year cycle, it starts to get a little fuzzy the further out we go. So some of the things that we're considering, there's general replacement items, there's life cycle replacements, classroom upgrades, facility improvements. So general replacements are things like paving, like the painting on the pavements, carpets, the furniture, generators, the emergency generators in buildings, life cycles, like the gym curtains in the high school gym. Oh my goodness, it's time. The stadium turf has a 7-year life cycle, just because it's so highly used. We need to replace it every 7 years. That's the warranty on it, so we need to take care of that. Some of the roofing in some of the buildings, especially what's in it?
I said every year.
Every year
you do.
Every year we do roofing. And then the boilers, we've been stringing those boilers along forever, and it's just time. Classroom upgrades, we set aside some funding for modifications to special ed classrooms. It's a small thing that we do, but they've made some huge improvements in some of those kids' lives. And then we're planning on making some big changes for the music program in the high school, as well as the radio program in the high school, expanding the facility space for radio to be able to address more students and have better access into the studio. And then facility improvements itself, taking a look at the JV field, adding lights, putting infrastructure in for the lights, placing the tennis courts next to the north field, adding lights to that. There's grant opportunities for Marion Lake Pool that we are highly likely to obtain from conversations we can have in County Parks. Millions of dollars that we could be putting in, and it's a dollar for dollar match. So if we spend $3 million, we get $3 million. Bus lot fuel tank replacement, again, that's a kind of a life cycle thing, but as we're looking at the electric buses, it's an opportunity to make some significant planning. And then the electric vehicles planning study, as we're looking at what we want to do with electric vehicles. We've added some facility planning capacity to see what we need to do to make those adjustments to this. Any questions on the capital plan? Awesome. And like we said, the big list of projects is available. Anybody wants to see it, just let me know.
How are their classroom upgrades, for example, determined?
Usually it's based on, especially like the special education classrooms, some of the specific needs of those students, whether it's behavioral issues, instructional spaces that they need to address in specific ways. The radio has been a big issue, a big ask for years because of how the studio is accessed separately from the classroom. They've been asking for a way to make that work. It's been fairly prohibitively expensive to make those upgrades. So this is an opportunity to put that more on the plan. and specifically call that out as a project that we want to address. So it's usually, it's comes after years of conversations about things that need to be addressed. Or wish lists, and when we get to a point where we can add it onto the list and say, all right, this is on the next living plan. Let's set it up here.
I guess we were talking previously about how the community could get involved in these type of things, and is there room for community feedback? So these would be examples of where the community could be part of a longer range discussion, certainly. Can of worms, I guess, to open it now, perhaps.
And we are taking a lot of these items off of not just 2 years ago when we did the long range facility master plan, some of the considerations that were raised in the master planning process. But previously we had a long, like 30-year maintenance plan. So we're continuing to work off of that 30-year maintenance plan as we're working towards implementing the long range master plan. So some of these things have been established a ways back, and we're continuing to work on it, but we will always continue to like prioritize. I mean, these there's always going to be some wiggle room within a capital plan for projects that can be done, cannot be done, and are not likely to be done. So we do our best to plan. I mean, not everything's going to happen in 6 years, but we do our best. And so we'll always be able to take those considerations and concerns from community members and from staff and see what we can do to make it work.
And it's worth noting, during the school bond, we added a whole lot of new science labs and material science labs and computer labs and technology labs. A lot was done at that time too, so it's not unnoticed.
Just the new robotics room. We added stools, we added overhead power poles, new tables with better space and better access. It's got a concrete floor for part of the room that the tires can gain traction on. So this is we do take a look at some of the needs in the classroom, instructional needs, and that we move forward from that. All right, technology. All right, again, it's a 6-year cycle, and not only just like construction, we also need to consider the increased costs of materials and wages, because technology isn't just stuff, it's people as well. We pay a portion of all of our teachers' salaries for professional development out of technology. We pay for part of Director Ronser's salary comes out of the, so used to calling Andrews. Director Ronser's salary comes out of capital and technology as well. So we do have to adjust for salary costs. And with the almost 30% jump over the last 4 years in salary costs for staff in the district, it's eaten up a significant portion of the funding within the existing budget. And so we need to address that in the next levy. We use it for, and so there's a list of things that we're looking at for the plan: staffing, continuing the technology coaches, the building techs, the district IT staff, the professional development time. All of the paras, bus drivers, all have access to 24 hours of technology related time in terms for training to use technology or for other access. Curriculum software is huge. We are moving more and more to digital platforms instead of paper textbooks, as well as classroom instructional tools. So that increase and that shift in our material needs will need to be addressed in this next levy as well, because 6 years ago we didn't foresee the huge shift as well into the digital curriculum plan. I didn't realize that. Classroom projects, the Promethean boards, the one-to-one iPads, looking at potential laptop adoptions at the high school for some of the higher grades. Those are all more like instructional based items. And some of the bigger ticket items are not as glamorous or shiny. But the internet and phone networks are in desperate need of upgrades. not quite 30-year-old phone system, but it's a system that is no longer supported. I believe, what's the end of life?
Not just end of life, but end of support.
And not just end of life, but end of support. The vendor will no longer support our phone system, which is a huge problem for us. So we are needing to look at replacing that. We need to upgrade our servers. We need to upgrade our security cameras. And so, as going back to where we started the conversation, this is the cycle for stuff. We need stuff. And so, as we're looking at that, these are some of the things that are bigger ticket items, but they're like the roots of the technology program. Right? So, any questions about technology, the technology plan?
As we've been talking about this too, the 2010 to 2016 levy, one of the major enhancements from that was bringing fiber cables into all of the schools. It was really into launching that one-to-one initiative, as I had mentioned, and there were some really tangible things that you could see. The last 6 years have really been about making sure that we are using equipment that is utilizing what we have put in. The next 6 years is making sure that that equipment is actually up and running and meeting industry standard. And so there'll be a little bit more of a balance probably in the next 6 years between not only having equipment that's working well on the back end, but also in the hands of our students as part of the reviews that we're going through. You know, I can't emphasize enough the people who are behind that to make that work, that Andres leads each and every day. And they're working throughout the summer. Sometimes they're working night and day to make sure that when teachers show up in the morning, the network is on, connectivity is there. When students arrive, they're being able to connect. And so we've become so dependent on, and I was talking to the Schools Foundation just this morning around curriculum adoptions. And, you know, it's no longer you have that curriculum adoption and then it lasts for 10 or 12 years. It's every 6 years, those are getting refreshed, which is great because you're getting the latest and greatest out of the materials, but the lifespan of the materials are not nearly as long in the digital era. And so we're really trying to braid funds between some basic ed dollars, but the foundation and then the levy to help kind of come together. So a lot coming into it. There'll be a lot of things that we're going to need to do, but Andrews, just thank you for all your continued work.
He's magically just comes and stands next to you, the computer starts working. We have that occur with the regional. Just for everyone, a reminder, we frequently refer to it as the CAP Tech levy because it is one levy that does cover both of these plans.
Jumping on the praise bandwagon, the last year and a half has demonstrated how absolutely necessary technology is in education today. And so I think that you've been able to be so agile with your team in providing these supports and resources to our staff and our students has been amazing. This levy is an opportunity for us as a community to support you and make sure that you have the capacity to continue to be flexible and agile. I know the National School Boards Association, right now the big campaign is closing the homework gap. I don't like the term because it doesn't sound like what it's talking about, but it's really talking about students having access to the technology they need when they're not in the school facility. So students need to have the bandwidth, they have to have connectivity, they've got to have the memory space, they've got to be able to have the device, all these things so that they can do their work when they're not in the school. And so as we learned, when you have a home with multiple students on multiple laptops trying to use the same bandwidth, these are areas where we as a system can support these kids and ensure equity for every student and every educator, every staff member that is working potentially remotely or needs to, is working late nights at home and needs to be able to connect in to store videos. We hit that ceiling this last year when you were talking about storing instruction videos, and there was only so much space where you could store those videos before you had to delete them and make room for new videos. So in building in the capacity for this and the continued professional development, because that's one of the most important things, is our staff being able to function with all of this technology. Is there enough capacity being built into this levy to really provide that agility and leverage to expand that for the sake of students. And unlike the enrichment levy, which has a hard ceiling, you cannot bring in more. What is the ceiling for this? Is there no ceiling for it? There's just being responsible, fiduciarily responsible to our community. But we can, if there were a space where we could really dream as a community of how we want to support, this and the capital levy are two areas where we can do that, right?
But yes, I think there are certain fence posts that we need to consider. There's only certain things that we can charge to technology in terms of physical items, instructional development, instructional technology. It really has to be tied in to material that is being put into the hands of a kid, or teaching a staff member to use a certain piece of technology material. So as much as we'd love to dream about things that we can put in here, it's still restricted. I believe that, I mean, we are asking for more in this levy cycle than we did in the previous one. It starts, I believe, around 7.2 million and goes up to about 7.8, which is about $1 million more a year than the last levy cycle. And it's mainly focused on the technology side. So we are providing additional capacity. Again, the technology plan is still, we're like 95% there, I want to say. Andrew, you say we're 95% done? You're ready to go? So we had a conversation about it this morning. We feel comfortable about the numbers that we're putting forward after the technology plan. It does give us additional capacity. It does account for staffing increase in costs, potential increase in costs. And so we do believe it does give us some agility. All right. The fun one. All right. 10, the transportation plan. Now, initially, our recommendation to the board was, let's not run the levy now. Let's wait a little bit. Let's get a better idea of where we want to go. A transportation levy can be run 1 year out of every 6 years. So it's on a similar cycle as a capital and technology levy, but you can only collect for 1 year. The interest that we've heard from community members as well as from the board is looking at replacing a portion of our fleet with electric vehicles, and taking a look at how we look at transportation and developing a plan for transportation similar to the long range master plan, the facilities planning, and the newer technology plan. And as we look at developing that plan, we can knock part of that off pretty quick in terms of buying buses. We can make that decision and we can go. But there's other things that we need to consider as part of a larger transportation plan as a whole, and that's safe walking routes, biking routes, the walking distance from the school to the homes. Right now we're at 3/4 of a mile for most of the buildings. We actually have authority to go out to a full mile from the buildings. You know, if you live within 1 mile, you walk. If you're outside of that mile, you get bused. We pushed out to, it used to be a half mile. We pushed out this year to 3/4 of a mile so that we could use our drivers at the high school and not have to add additional staff. So there's a lot of things that we need to consider as we're looking at this concept of a transportation master plan. Is what do the safe walking routes look like? What do the biking routes look like? What do the bus routes look like? How far do we want to bus kids? And then we also have the transportation demand management plan with the city. It's an agreement with the city that was put in place when we built Peak, or when Boys and Girls built Peak, because there's a credible concern about the transportation demand in this block in the neighborhood with the increased traffic flow, parents dropping off and whatnot. So there are certain things that we need to abide by within the TDMP about how many parking spots, how much access, how many biking walks, walk ups do we have? So those are other things that we need to throw into this master plan. So we'll definitely start taking steps this year to put in a master plan, but it's not something that we can just drop right away in terms of looking at it. So as we're looking at the electric bus as part of this concept, Andrews, if you could slide, we have options. And as a money guy, I always like options. There's a couple things that we can look at. One, we can do just a straight replacement. We just buy buses and then things roll off and just get rid of them, but we've already got the buses in place. The other concept is using the depreciation cycle, and I believe that's kind of where the discussion was leading to in the study session. Was as 2 buses roll off, let's buy 2 buses. The thing that we need to think about is the difference between what we receive from the state and our depreciation reimbursement, because we get reimbursed by the state for the depreciation of the buses so that we have money to buy buses. It doesn't cover the entirety of the cost, and that's why we did have a transportation levy. But it's lately we've been working on a cycle where we've been able to cover most of the cost with our depreciation payment. So we usually get about $300,000 a year. If we were to look at buying 2 buses, electric buses at $400,000, it's come down in price, but once we add on the options that we need, like cameras, stop pedals, radios, it adds up. So assuming a $400,000 bus, 2 buses will be $800,000, which means that we have a $500,000 difference. The recommendation is that we need to replace 20 large buses. So 20 large buses at $500,000 is it's a lot of money. So as we're
I'm just writing down the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm not multiplying.
Yeah. So there's a separate document on there, Andrews, if you could pull that up. These are the options we have as we're looking at this concept of using depreciation payments. One, we can front load it, run 1 levy for $5 million. This would cover the entirety of the cost that we need, and we just start chipping away at it over the 10 years it would take us to buy these buses. Option B is we split it 60-40. We collect the majority of the money in the first year of the first cycle, and then we run a second cycle levy for a significantly less amount. That would get us most of the money up front. We'd be able to chip away at it, and then we'd get a second influx and finish getting the buses in the second cycle. Third option is we just split it straight down the middle. We'd have a little bit more, but it would be a little tighter towards running the second cycle. It would be a bit more consistent in terms of tax. But the problem is when you see the rates, that is 1 year. So if we run a $5 million levy once, we're looking at 32 cents per thousand assessed value. Assuming $1 million home, that's $324.
The 1 year.
For 1 year. If we go with
But
option,
only once.
but
That
only
1
once.
year, your cycle.
Yeah, only once. If we go with option B, where it's the 60-40, we're looking at a 1 year of $227, and then 6 years later, you get hit with a $97 bump. If we,
Sorry, can I just ask, what are the little lines for, like under option B?
and those are zeros.
Oh, okay.
Those are zeros. I apologize. I will clean this table up. This was something as I was, I had an aha today where I was just like, I need to put this on, and I missed deleting those zeros. I apologize. I'll clean that up and we'll re-upload it. If we go with just the straight option, it's 1 year, it's $160. 6 years later, it's $160. So it's not quite a bigger bump, but it is more consistent and a bit more predictable. So those are some options that we can look at. Go ahead.
That doesn't change the rate at which we would do the conversion, purchasing the electric. As they depreciate out, right? Like either way we do it, the rate of the conversion would be the same.
Correct, and it would still be, about 10 years.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at B and C, you're looking at 6 years, you've got to run again, so you're then, I hate to use the word banking, but you're banking on, in 6 years, you're gonna have the transportation levy again. Whereas in option A, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. That might teach.
And sorry, the worst case scenario there being if it didn't pass the second time, we'd end up with like a halfway transformed fleet.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in the scenario where we collect the full amount for the 10 years at the top, and then slowly use that money over the 10-year period, what do you suspect is happening to the price of electric buses? It's going down, becoming less expensive. So I'm just trying to weigh that option of what happens to that money while it's sitting there ahead of time, because it's not going to be used all at once. It's going to be used over a span of time. And is there any risk of, if you break it up, that it's going to be more expensive down the road, or like what's the, I mean, what's the risk of waste or?
The likelihood of either way, you would be able to use those dollars to buy buses. So either we use it for electric buses, and if say 8 years down the road, the cost of electric buses significantly decreases where it's like $200,000 instead of almost 400. Great, we can buy more, because probably by that point they'll also be doing mid-sized buses or even small buses. So those are things that we can be thinking about replacing using those additional dollars. If they don't, we still have mid-sized diesel and small diesel buses that we need to replace. So that would provide additional capacity in helping the fleet move. So there's a small risk where it may not be used all the way, but we'd still be able to use it.
I think this question is perfect to be put to the community in terms of the thought exchange. I mean, my gut says, I think we've been good stewards of money on capital projects and coming in on time and under budget, or at least at budget. And, challenge us if, collect half now, collect half in 6 years, and it might even be less. And, but that's my thinking. Some people might say, just take it from me now and go do your thing. And I think that, putting this out there in the thought exchange is I think we should do that to get that feedback.
Yeah, I agree.
So today, I guess, initially we talked about $0 for the transportation levy. What was the expectation for buses being replaced over the next 6 years? Like what were we planning? I know next year 2 buses, and the year after 2 buses.
So it's the cycle that we're on. We still have a fairly healthy fund balance in terms of being able to buy buses. So we would be able to use that money probably for another 4 years to replace the fleet. We only have a couple buses that are rolling off, like 2 years this year, I think 3 the following year. And so most of those would have been able to be taken care of out of the depreciation schedule, but we're going to start hitting into the larger roll-offs of these the other buses. So we'd be able to use the fund balance that we have to do it. But in order for us to transition to an electric fleet, we would need not only the depreciation payments, but the additional levy capacity to buy those electric buses, but we also need to use the fund balance that we have now to replace the mid and small size diesel buses. So it's the likelihood that we need to run a levy, we would probably really be 3 to 4 years out if we were just doing straight diesel to diesel.
And sorry, I know we've talked about this multiple times now. Where in this scenario, where would the money be coming from to build charging stations and
That's capital.
That was right. So we would be able to put that in when? Like, because given that in this capital levy, we would be only looking at the planning part of it.
Yeah, we've actually put in some adjustments into the capital levy plan to factor that in. When we build a capital plan, we take a look at all the projects that we plan on doing over the 6-year period, and then estimate the cost and then average it out over the 6 years. So it's more a matter of at what point would we want to do it, or do we need to do it, and what are we going to bump from that year in the plan to later in the plan. So we have the capacity to do it built into the levy. It's just a matter of reprioritizing when.
Just for me, the plan that's not really shown is if we had a schedule for replacing buses today, diesel to diesel, and we, instead of buying diesel buses at the same rate, we bought electric buses. So it doesn't call for 12 new electric buses in the next 6 years. It calls for some subset less. What does that plan look like? Because I don't want to, I mean, selling off a diesel bus before its lifetime doesn't seem fiduciarily good. So it seems like you've got an accelerated plan with the $5 million cost. So I push back on that.
While the buses may still have life to them, and once we hit that 12-year mark, we no longer receive state depreciation payments for them. So we would have assets on our fleet that essentially we're not getting paid for. So it would be less responsible for us to continue to use these buses. Not at all. Additionally, we get credit for them when we trade them in. So we were able to take those buses that still have a lot of useful life on them, and then put that credit towards buses that are new. And so it allows us to be a bit more responsible with our transportation dollars, because we're still getting money from the state because everything's still on the schedule. Plus, we're getting the credit for having lightly used, because I've seen my kids' buses, lightly used buses, that we can sell to other districts. We actually have districts calling us up saying, hey, when are you doing a sale? Because our buses are in great condition and they're low mileage, and we get fairly good money for them. So we're not going to hold on to a fleet that's aged off the schedule and is, hitting 100,000 miles on the frames, on the engines, when we could be doing things a bit more proactively to ensure that we're receiving funding.
Yeah, I guess the issue with proactive, when it's a more expensive bus, would be the concern. You might be, it could be fiduciary responsible to be less proactive, and allow the electric buses to come down in price.
Yeah.
You might be saving more money that way. And, in advance, taking 2 extra years on a bus might not be so bad. All I'm suggesting is there is a diesel to diesel replacement cycle that is significantly less than what is proposed here. And the suggestion would be to keep that. And then the other suggestion might be is if in a year from now, these 2 buses that we are going to replace, we don't have a fully baked EV plan, maybe we push the replacement of those 2 out another year so that we can replace them with electric buses. So it's a little bit more flexibility in recognizing that this is a fleet change. We have to be responsible about it. Maybe we can slow it down a little bit to take full advantage of our diesel fleet as opposed to replacing early because of the price reductions in the EV space.
And I think that was part of also the initial recommendation that we not run a transportation levy this coming cycle. We wait a year or 2 is to see the technology the cost of the technology come down, see where it comes from, see what other opportunities are out there, because the market is picking up, but it's still not to the point where it's hugely sustainable in terms of being able to have a lot of competition in the marketplace. And so I think our initial recommendation was, I have no problems with electric buses. I think it would be prudent of us to kind of hold off for just a little bit, and run it then.
The hold off sounds reasonable, but the concern would be the 48 years of diesel buses that we'll be buying in the next 3 years. You know, those buses will be running for 48 plus years. That's a long time to be burning diesel. So yeah, how do we manage that aspect of it, of these new buses right around the corner?
So I mean, that's also one of the options. That's option one. Straight replacement. We run the $5 million levy. We buy buses. We buy most of the buses up front, and then as things roll off.
No, that's not option one. That's not option one.
Okay, well, that was option one on my side.
Yeah, sorry, there's the option, as I said, there's an
Yeah.
option missing, which is replace at the rate we were planning to replace. And perhaps if we could raise the money now, replacing at the rate we were planning to replace. And maybe delay the first purchase of those 2 buses by 1 year so that we have an EV plan that allows us to buy these next 4 buses as EVs.
So are you saying raise the money in 2022 and then delay the implementation of this plan until 2023, rather than waiting to raise the money in 2023?
Correct, yes, and it would be a lesser amount based on whatever we're planning to replace.
So maybe something more along the lines of option B, where we raise the $3.5 million up front, and then we run a second cycle, and then get the rest of the money further out.
2028.
I'm confused at this point. Is the option A with the 5 million, we're going out like next year and buying 20 buses?
No, it's for 2023.
No, it would option A is more along the line, let's front load all the depreciation purchases, all the scheduled replacements. Let's front load that. But what we could also do is take that 5 million and punch it up a bit and just start buying the buses. So go up to 7 million, start buying more buses right off the bat. Instead of buying 2 every year, we buy 4 every year. So it's that extra increase. And then just roll it off.
So
it would be accelerating the replacement of those.
Yeah, to me, that doesn't feel fiscally responsible just because of the many changes going on in the world of electric vehicles. I feel like doing it in a more measured way is more responsible and is less likely to kind of get the district stuck down like a one-way street where suddenly like our technology is not compatible with the normal electric bus technology or something like that. Like there's some disadvantages to being a big early adopter of a new technology. So I kind of like this. Like I like making the commitment. I like raising as much money as possible early on for this. Make changes.
So I guess I'm confused about David's point then. Like if we wait 3 years to buy, then we're buying more diesel buses between now and then, but that's not the proposal, right? Sorry, I'm talking.
So let me see if we can clarify this a little bit more. Are you asking what would the levy ask be if we were just doing diesel?
No, I know we're doing diesel now. So if we're just doing diesel replacement, we'd ask for $0 for the transportation levy. Because you can buy 4 buses in the next 3 years that you want to do, right? We'd be asking for 0. All I'm saying is, what would the ask be for a transportation levy now, so that in the next 3 years, we could buy 4 electric buses? So it's keeping your same fleet replacement schedule. Instead of replacing with diesel, replace with an EV. What is the cost? And that is significantly less than $5 million. And it's a much slower rate of fleet replacement to EV. We're okay with that. We also continue to get the same expected lifespan of our existing diesel buses, just as we always did. Even if we were never changing the fleet, we'd get a lifespan out of that. We want to continue, we'd want to continue that. So I think all that together gives us a 6-year levy that's much less, and then another 6-year levy that is much less, presumably.
Yeah.
That's option C.
right?
No.
It'd be about a 1
It would be about 1.6, 1.7.
Yeah, option C is we're expecting a replacement of 20 buses in 10 years, which is not, it's not the current plan.
This is an option D.
This is an option D.
Option D.
uh,
So it would be a much
more fiscally
slower-
responsible,
a much-
slower replacement
Lower replacement.
that utilizes the fleet to its maximum life that we already have, and then allows us to take more advantage of the changes in EV technology. I mean, we're used to, in technology side, we've replaced our internet routers multiple times. You know, we've taken advantage of fiber and all that type of thing in different ways. That same cycle is happening in EV. And we'll build experience and we'll know how to deal with long-range buses, short-range buses, sports buses, all the different use cases, small ones, large ones, over time. So going a little slower isn't a bad deal for us.
And then potentially, then in 2029, you can ask for a lot more if we want to, if the technology is there and it's cheaper, we can just ask for the leftover.
So you're, can it, just to clarify more, I just want to make sure I understand that. So you're proposing that we only ask for the buses that are going to roll off and need to be replaced in the next 6 years. However many that is.
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
got it. Thank you.
So I have a question as far as, for sure, the idea of going out to the public and asking for input via thought exchange is great, and we talked about that at the study session. My question is, do we want to be asking like option A, option B, option C, option D, or do we want to just gauge general support for a levy that would help us gradually switch our fleet to an electric bus?
I think one of the enhanced questions that could go with that is, A, what is your interest overall in replacing the fleet over the long term with an electric fleet? So that's the first one. I think you'll get a good response with that based on our community. And then I think the second question is, at what rate? At what speed? Is this, you know, the faster we do it, which means it's going to cost us more money upfront to replace it, and yet the carbon footprint is a whole lot different. The environmental impact that we have is an investment in the environment, but it's going to cost us a whole lot more, and we're not going to get that return investment appreciation, all that we would normally get with a much slower plan. Or when people say, no, I appreciate reducing the carbon footprint, but let's take full advantage, as David was saying, of every bit of every cent of depreciation that we can over a much longer period of time and eventually get that. And I think in a thought exchange, that's something that we could gauge the community's desire for faster, bigger environmental impact versus slower and less financial impact.
There, to be noted though, there is no environmental benefit for acceleration because these buses will be sold to somebody else, will just be used by somebody else.
Yeah.
So I think actually thought exchange should be used at a different stage in the sense where when you get people's opinions on certain things, they kind of have to also know something about the topic, right? To decide whether, and they have to be in this kind of intense, you know, study session, understand it. Otherwise, it won't be as useful. So I think the board should actually decide on an option, then ask the public, you know, if this option makes sense and what are some other concerns. Start from there instead of getting too broad, right? And I like the option D, and it's exciting that if we present the whole, the vision to the community, and they see that we're being very prudent with only asking for $1 million, right? And then still getting some tangible returns. So if we can communicate that to the community, and then in thought exchange, ask them, you know, what do they think of this plan? Is it something a plan they would support? Or would they want to do either a bigger plan or a smaller plan?
I'm open to that possibility, because I do feel like most people are not gonna look at this chart and understand what they're looking at. You know, most people aren't gonna know, like, sort of what does that translate into? How much am I gonna actually have to pay for this? Like, how much do I care about, you know, having a green district versus how much is coming out of my own pocket? I would be fine with making it more specific, like one specific option, if people feel comfortable choosing one of these options to present, because we're not wedded to it. Like, it's not cast in stone. You know, if we present this option, everyone's like, no, that's terrible. No way, I'm not spending a dime. Then we're like, okay, that's information we didn't have before. I did want to say, just David, in terms of like, you know, when we sell our diesel buses off the island, someone else is still using them. That is true, but there's still value in switching to electric buses, partly because we know that eventually, you know, vehicles are going that way. So it's prudent to start the process, to commit to starting the process, you know, at some point. A, and B, having electric buses is part of kind of like all of the district's efforts to minimize its footprint, you know, and also it kind of sends a message to the community, it sends a message to students, like, that we care and that we're trying to do something to not make things worse. So I feel like even though yes, someone else will still be driving those people buses around, there's still some value. Yeah.
Right, so it is, I think, in the end, we are saving a little bit. If we're buying less, we're not buying any more.
I really want to hear from the community in terms of the cost, and I think it's very, frankly, simple to take what Ty has done already and make choices. And in terms, I mean, I want to hear from the community on, you know, we might be surprised when people say, I want to spend the money and I want it to happen now, versus, you know, the depreciation. And I think they're all valid arguments, and I don't know what our community is going to say. And I think that in terms of, you know, changing the rate out to dollars, that's more easily understandable, and say, you know, if your house is valued at $1 million, you're going to be paying $324 or whatever that says. I can't even see, but you know, whatever it is, I have faith in us that we can make it very clear, and I want to know what our community wants, because I don't know. And so I don't think I don't know. I want to know.
I'm fine with that too. But I do want to ask those specific questions. Like, I don't want to just be like, gee, do you think electric buses are a good idea? Because to me, like, that's not necessarily an indication of how people are going to vote on the levy. Like, I do think people want to know, like, how much is this going to cost me?
But I think, I mean, to get really, I mean, we can, I think to present, you know, taking 3 options. And the first one being, we continue with diesel. And the second one being, like, you know, pick a mid option there, like B. And then the third one, David's proposal, we do it in our depreciation schedule. You know, that, not necessarily that we have to do exactly what is voted on, but at least it will gauge our understanding of where the community.
I really like that idea. I like the idea of doing like 3 options. Are people okay with those 3 being the 3 options? Yeah.
Can you clarify?
Yeah.
3.
So it sounds like one is stick with diesel buses, right? One is,
which means, you know, no levy now, but maybe in 3 or 4 years, whatever you say.
Right. And then option B.
So can I clarify it? So
Yeah.
option B really sounds like we take option B and we flip it. So really it would be, you know, 1.5 million upfront, buy a few buses, test them out, drive them around for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then at 6 years later, we say, let's get more money.
Right.
Let's fund.
And how many can we purchase with that higher levy amount with hopefully potentially a lower cost bus, because it's 6 years later. And the assumption is that the cost would be less.
Right. So yeah, so option D is the flipped option B, really. So those would be the 3 options. Stick with all diesel, option B, and then option D, which is basically flipped.
Option D up there.
Yeah.
Oh, so like option B and then option D.
And then option D, which is basically like 1.5 million soon, and then 3.5 million later.
I mean, or we could just, you know, I mean, that's fine, but we also could just say, you know, instead of option B, say option A, like, do we want to bite the bullet and do it now? Let's go. And then that way we can see where the numbers fall. And, you know, I'm sure they're going to be mixed. And so if, you know, if the numbers are between A and B, then, you know, we kind of lean this way, and just throwing it out there. But
how do you feel about that?
It just feels like we've had multiple bond votes, do everything, do a little. We know where that landed. Then we sat in the long range facilities plan and we had do everything, do a little. We know where that landed. So, and then we had the high cap program changes, do everything, do a little. You know where that landed. How many times do we have to be told?
That's true, but this is the thought exchange, and that way we can use that argument to the community when we're trying to pass the levy. So I'm not saying that's the right thing to do.
Those are good options.
But it may, there are three very distinct options, and then this way we can know, okay, our community does not support this, let's head this way. So I'm not arguing that we do it. I'm just saying, and I agree with you, I don't think the community is going to support that, but I think that in order to gauge the interest of the others, one's extreme on one side, one's extreme on the other side, and then one's kind of in the middle, and then to see where things fall. And then, as with the thought exchange and how people can provide feedback, I don't, that's just what I.
So if most people prefer the middle option, then could you do a second thought exchange, like ask the people who participated in the first one, like, okay, if we were to go with the middle option, would you prefer doing like more money up front or smaller money up front? I don't know about the timing on that is the only thing, because
There are things that at the board we need to decide too, and I should talk about being fiscally responsible, recognizing that with the reality is people are like, well, am I gonna live here for the next 5 years and pay everything up, And then, so, I think we also, when we ask questions, we should already think that we know already. We should not also ask because it kind of distracts from what we really want to know. Right, to kind of limit and be very intentional about the purpose of the information we want to get.
You also risk getting a very negative reaction to it when you have a very big extreme on one side. People feel they have to be more negative about your effort.
But on the flip side, I think that saying all diesel for, another 48 years, I think that's a big negative too. So why would we even throw that one out there? I think if we do three options, kind of big, middle, and nothing, then at that point, once we see the feedback, then it is the board's responsibility to really crunch the numbers, work with Ty, and figure out, what is the lifespan of these? What's our depreciation schedule? What exactly do we need now? And then that's what we propose as a levy. So this isn't passing the buck. This is a big question for our community, and this will gauge the interest in it. And rather than having two that are pretty close together, I don't know. That's just my opinion.
So that seems very reasonable. It sounds like we're kind of coming to consensus on that, on having the three options. Brian, you're kind of nodding. Yeah, okay, we're kind of coming to a consensus on that. And then my question is, obviously it'll take some time to write the questions and to kind of put the thought exchange together. And so we can maybe get a little kind of sneak preview of that at our next study session, but then we'll have to wait until the following board meeting to actually sort of approve that thought exchange, the content of that thought exchange, unless we do an extra meeting.
You could always do a special meeting with a one item that you were going to take action on.
Yeah.
So if you had a study session and went through it all and got to where we are, even a special meeting can only need 24-hour notice, but again, you're going to be doing it digitally, and then you have one item.
Okay. So that seems very reasonable. Brian,
Yeah, the one thing that I've been scratching my head over is also being just really cautious and respectful of all the different demographics on the island who would be paying this tax. So for many people, that $324, that one-time payment of $324, it would be easy, not a big deal. But there are many people on our island that would be a huge deal. And so I hesitate to bring the specter of Proposition 1 into the room, but we really need to look at what we're asking our community for. And when we talk about these numbers and stuff, of just making sure that we're not cavalier about it, that we understand that $324 added onto your taxes at the end of the year for some people could be devastating. So
What did we ask? You're saying, what did we ask for 6 years ago?
About $600,000.
So what was that? The rate?
Can you flip the slide back? Go to the other tab. And then go to the next slide.
About 5.
Ten years ago, we were 6.
It was about 5 cents per thousand. So
5 cents.
5 cents per thousand.
Well, and housing prices, too. I mean, home values.
That would have been 2017.
Yeah.
Okay, so that sounds like a plan. Do we need to actually vote on that? Like the, not really, we're not deciding anything yet, so, okay. Okay. Is there any more to your slideshow?
So this table, this slide is really quick. This has all the projected rates for the enrichment, the cap tax levy, and then the transportation levy. This only had option A on it from the other document. That's just kind of a placeholder that for us to talk about. Hit the next slide. Considerations. We're still working on the transportation plan, the technology plan. We talked about that. We're gonna have that off. We will be going out. It sounds most likely that we will be going out for a transportation levy before we have a concrete transportation development plan. So that's just something that we need to be aware of, is that once what's driving the or is the levy driving the plan, or should the plan be driving the levy? So that's something that we could then does need to be considered. And then election costs on cycle versus off cycle. We get charged proportionately for the cost of what's on the ballot book. So for years when there are fewer things in the ballot book and fewer voters, we get a significantly less of a bill than if we were to run something in November. If we get something, our bill will be less in February than would be in November, because there's fewer voters, there's fewer items on the ballot. So if we were to go in a completely off cycle item, there may only be 1 or 2 things on the ballot from Mercer Island, and our proportionate share of that would be significantly less, because those items are only coming to Mercer. So I don't think we necessarily need to think of election costs as a prohibitive item when we're talking about the timing of levies and elections.
There is a 2023 election for the city for their parks levy. So we could consider that too. So we would be in conjunction with this.
Should be another item on the ballot.
Okay, that's it. Thank you so much. Moving on to board policy 1800 OE10 instructional program, additional bilingual grant application approval. This is the TBIP application.
So this is an annual I-grant that we bring before the school board. It's one of the few that actually that we do bring forward as part of the actual plan itself that's required by OSPI. Just as a quick reminder, there are 2 major buckets of money when we're talking about our English language learners or English learners. We have Title III, and Title III is, if we think of it, it oftentimes pays for things. It pays for professional development. It pays for resources. It pays for things that are used in the instructional moment in the classroom and the professional development behind it. The transitional bilingual instructional program, the TBIP, that is really paying for the people. And this has had a pretty sharp increase in my 8 years or so in the central office. I think when I first started working with this budget, we were under 200,000 in our TBIP total allocation. It has increased for a couple of reasons. One is we've continued to see increase, although it's flattened off a little bit, of incoming students who are qualifying for EL services. But more importantly, as part of McCleary, there was a massive enhancement that was part of McCleary. And then as part of the ongoing recovery dollars, even though they're not recovery, these will be ongoing, there was actually an enhancement as well. So you can see that over time, actually our numbers, if you were to compare historically, have gone up quite a bit to what you're seeing in terms of levels this year, where we expect it to be somewhere between 425 and 450,000 probably this year. We have added some staffing to our high school this year to support our English learners, and that has been an enhancement. We've continued to support our elementaries with teachers, as well as kind of coordinator coaches, if you will, and as well as support staff, and then we continue to support our middle school. You know, staffing really is really consumed by this budget, but it's allowed us to continue to not have to use levy quite as much and basic ed to pay, because the TBEP dollars have increased, which we're grateful for. So that's a little bit of background there. Nova Williams, who would typically be here, I sent her on her way here this evening a little earlier on, but I'm quite familiar with the program as well, or at least us having written the grants, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
At some point this year, not right now, and definitely not tonight, I would love to hear a little bit about how English learners have been affected by remote instruction and by the pandemic and kind of, you know, but I'm not expecting that tonight.
I can give you one number.
Yeah.
We would always want it to be 100%, but that's probably not completely realistic. But we had 65% of our EL learners last year exit out of the program, even during last year. So we continue to see an increase in a pretty flat number because we get a lot of new families in and we're testing like crazy. But that was pretty astounding number of students who still exited out of it. Now, a student doesn't exit out and then there's no support. We continue to support for at least one more year and we follow those students. And that's part of why the enhanced dollars here are really helpful with our staffing, is it's not just about the students who are at level, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's also the students at level 5 and beyond that we can continue. But we had a pretty remarkable group again last year who worked through. And I think that's in part because of the ongoing intervention services that we were providing for pull-out groups in the afternoon when students' day had ended, and continuing to work with them.
That is great, thank you. Anyone have any questions?
I move we approve the transitional bilingual grant application as published.
So the motion is to approve the transitional bilingual grant application. All in favor, please say aye. And
Aye.
all opposed, say nay. No abstentions. That passes. Thank you very much for that. Okay, next topic is board policy 1001, governance commitment, superintendent succession. So I think the first thing that I'd like to do here is just a really quick update, like for the very small number of the general public that is still watching this meeting, just to let them know that we had another study session. We basically have weekly study sessions at this point, and we had one yesterday. And at that one, we talked about thought exchange, both in terms of how to use it to gauge community feeling about the levies, and also to get input from the community in terms of what qualities they would like to see in their next superintendent and kind of how they feel the district is doing overall. We have another study session scheduled for next week on Tuesday at 3:15, and these meetings are open for viewing by the public on Zoom. They are not recorded. No action is taken at these meetings. They are just for the board to kind of educate ourselves and have some discussion on these topics. I have a summary that I wrote of the meeting yesterday that I would like to read to you guys. And so far we've been doing the board approving every summary before it goes on the website. But I would like to propose that maybe we move away from that, because I think if the president writes the summary, the president is authorized to speak on behalf of the board. And I don't see how that's any different than, like, you know, our communications director posting a summary of something that's happened. So I think it's a kind of it's some kind of bogging us down if we have to wait for the next meeting so that the board can approve it and then it can go on. Like, if the goal is to inform the public about what's happening, it just makes more sense to go directly. But I will read you my summary, which is Wednesday, September 8th. The board held it'll say that it was a study session. Wednesday, September 8th, the board held a preliminary discussion of what questions to ask in soliciting community input via thought exchange. The president and vice president will generate a draft for the board to review at the next study session. Something like that, if we're okay with that. Right. As a group, can we agree that in the future, I'm just gonna write the summaries myself and post them? And of course, if anyone has any problems with what I'm posting, let me know, and we can revisit that policy. Okay, thank you. David, do you want to give an update on the plan with the lawyer? Or I can do it. Okay, I'm on a roll here. So we have reached out to an education law attorney who has a lot of expertise and experience with superintendent searches and hiring. And his name is Curtis Leonard at Pacifica Law Group, and came very highly recommended to us. And David and I have an appointment to meet with him on Zoom tomorrow morning, just to give him a little bit of background about the district and ask him a few preliminary questions. And then, assuming that all seems good, we're going to invite him to come and meet with the board at it would be an executive session to be able to answer questions about kind of legal aspects and kind of the correct way of doing certain things to make sure that we're doing everything completely above board and as we're supposed to. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Rachel, the cost of this, well, we kind of discussed about our local court with him, and then will there be a time where they will present an estimate?
Yeah, David.
Yeah, we'll be getting the costs as part of this Friday meeting, but you know, in general, for these type of activities, we will need a lawyer who works for the board to do the contracts and help us understand the process. And there's obviously W's we need to follow, all that type of thing. So having a private outside counsel who is not affiliated with the district in any way actually protects the board and protects the district in a multitude of ways. So this is what we did last time as well, but it's a best practice that's actually highly recommended.
But it's a great question, and we absolutely will be getting rates and have that information available. Tomorrow, just sort of like a meet and greet. Brian, did you have a lot to share?
Yeah, no, it was just used that would be an executive session, and I was wondering. Obviously, but there may be some information about RCWs and timelines and things that may be helpful for the public to know. So is there possible to do a hybrid of maybe some of those things that could be discussed very open or informational that we can receive along with the public? That's great for everybody to know. And then for those confidential questions and things move into executive session, or because it's private counsel, doesn't mean it needs to be executive. I just want to.
Sure, seems to me like the first time we meet with him, we should do it in executive session and then we can talk to him about that. And I'm sure there's absolutely no reason why he couldn't be part of a regular board meeting to kind of present what his services are, what he's doing for us, and some of the legal aspects of how the search has, how the decision-making process has to happen. Yeah.
He can answer this for us, but if he's the board's lawyer, you've got to be careful with privilege and confidentiality. So he can answer those better in this situation.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily, it doesn't mean that we can't then pass on information that we've received. But
Sure.
asking the lawyer to do it is.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. Thank you. Yeah. Any other updates or questions or no? Okay. So we'll have a draft of some questions for thought exchange by the next study session.
In the update that you made, I think we've made this clear in past updates, but I'm not sure about public input. So in our study sessions, there's not really a spot for public input at study sessions because of the nature of it. But folks can reach out to us anytime by email to the board or can provide public input on the subject at our regular meetings. But the board is available in a multitude of ways for people to provide input on superintendent session. But if we can find a way to clarify that for the public as well, because I know there's been some folks have written to us saying, when do we get to opt in and share our voices? And the thing is that the public can always write us an email, give us a call.
That's a good clarification. I wonder if we should put a little blurb on that search page with like how and when are we going to be asking for public input? Yeah. Good.
I think there needs to be a time for us to talk about the timeline, kind of when do we do community engagement, and so that helps people to be prepared. So if we can spend one of the study session to figure out our general timeline, and using on the past search is kind of give us a framework, so we can put kind of range of dates around that.
Anything else? No? Okay. That's that. We're not taking any action at this time. So moving on to board policy 1005, board officers legislative priorities for Wasco Legislative Assembly. BTM.
So as you can see that they have rescheduled the General Assembly to the end of October, and so that gives us some time.
So the General Assembly has been rescheduled to the end of October 29th and 30th. And that gives us some time to look over the handbook of the priorities this year. And then I will do what we did last year to get a gauge of where we're all at, so that when I attend it, I can, vote. I've never done it before, so I've assumed it's pretty easy. There to follow everybody else and put forth our priorities for Rhode Island. Anything to add or any questions?
In there, it's also, as the delegate, it's good to know how the board would generally vote on things that are up for amendments and things. Those will be listed in the handbook so that either the board just says, we trust you, go forth and make the best decision. Because you'll hear argument all the time. Or if there's something one way in. I think if anybody wants to make an amendment, then because it's virtual, I don't believe they're going to take amendments from the floor. They'll have to be presented ahead of time in written form. And so if anyone has some amendments they'd like to propose, the earlier we could get to that as a body would probably be helpful. So you could submit them on time and speak to them at the assembly.
So kind of based on your agenda, right, guys, like we can put this on the calendar next year, the next meeting, or it seems like we still have time to the beginning of October. So just let me know.
Okay. We'll take a look. So either the first or either the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Because
the voting is
The voting is at the 29th or 30th, so it gives us some time. So, you know, a meeting that's not too long, that you can miss it.
We will do that.
I think also with the priorities, I think what they did last year was interesting that we voted on the priorities after the assembly was done and completed, so there may be even a little time for those priorities. It's how you would vote on the floor for all the different amendments and proposals. So even for the actual prioritization, those top 15, you may actually have to do them a little bit more.
Yeah, but then could we, I can create the Excel, the Google form. And if I can send it to you all, you guys can take it. And then when we come to the meeting, we will have things to talk about already.
Tam, you could also send it to me and I could then either link it or put it in the board weekly update as well.
Okay. Okay.
But the handbook that is linked here is already complete, right? Okay. The language is kind of confusing. Okay. Anything else about that? No? Okay.
Just adding in, so I love that you listed there the 2021 legislative priorities. Those are for the last legislative session that we've just completed.
Yeah.
Whereas the 2021 general assembly handbook is for next,
Right.
the 2022 legislative priorities.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to full governance process monitoring. Topic is board policy 1800 OE for staff compensation. This is the annual monitoring of this board policy.
I move that, I move that we find the superintendent in compliance of OE for staff compensation.
I second.
All in favor of finding the superintendent in compliance with OE4 staff compensation? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. No nays, no abstentions. That passes. Next up, we have post monitoring language review. Board policy 1008 annual agenda planning language review. So. Does anyone have any things that they want to raise in terms of language review for this? Not seeing anything. I don't have it for myself. Okay. This was just for discussion, so there's no discussion. We don't have to do anything then, right? That's it. That was a suggestion of 0. No changes. No changes. Yeah. Okay. Next, we just have the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda as published.
Second.
All in favor of approving the consent agenda as
Actually, sorry, real quickly, just a point of discussion.
Yes.
On the instructional materials committee. IMC committee, that's redundant, right?
Yeah.
But-
IMC committee.
Yeah, okay, but the real question is, so I noticed we've got an English language learners specialist in there. Do we also have a special ed specialist and a high cap specialist in there?
We do not, per policy, it's in there that we have an EL teacher and a librarian as kind of 2 separate ones, but it's not in there as those are standing members. We've had them in the past. David Baxter is a former member of that committee who represented both West Mercer 3rd grade and kind of that lens. So, you know, it evolves over time on what it is, but there's not specific other categories in there per the policy.
Is that, who makes that policy again? Is that a board policy or an administration policy? It feels like maybe perhaps it doesn't matter now for approval, but something we should consider, especially as we think about inclusive education and single classrooms, single instructional material that applies to a much broader segment of people.
Yeah, I think it's those who make up the actual instructional material selection team is really important to have all of those voices. Remembering that the IMC itself is really looking at, was a process followed? Do these reflect the values of our school district? Do parents see this through the parent lens as being something that would resonate with community? And so the committee itself is not as invested in all of the content. That's more the actual groups that bring the materials to the IMC itself. And so, you know, those different lenses that we have in there, as you can see from the makeup of that committee, you know, we try to grab a wide range of practitioners, perspective from parents, but it's something that we could certainly consider as we're looking, you know, towards the future and looking at different committee membership. Certainly on our Superintendent Teaching and Learning Advisory, that's where we have all of those different perspectives in there as well, which are influencing curriculum adoption. So just to give you kind of historical.
To your question, or to just see that it is a BP, a board policy. So if there was going to be additions added, and it does reference board policy 001, the values, vision, and mission. So it does reference that, but it would be something that would need to come to the board for changes in the language.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Returning to, does anybody have anything else they want to discuss about things on the consent agenda? Okay. Then we had a motion, correct, to approve the consent agenda as published, and we had a second. So all in favor of the consent agenda being approved as written, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. No abstentions. That passes unanimously. Announcements.
Just a reminder, you have a study session next Tuesday. Add it to your calendar, 3:15 to 4:45. We'll make sure that it gets posted accordingly. But there's going to be lots happening. Please check the update. Craig's trying to give you all the different things as they're occurring. Curriculum nights are going to be virtual, so they're not going to be on campuses. I think some other things might be switching to that as we think about large group activities. Those are really all the answers.
I would just like to let everyone know that I will be attending that study session by Zoom. Board reports. Oh, I'm sorry, legislative representative update. You kind of did. You kind of already have it. Okay. Board report.
Of course. One thing I want to mention is that I was able to attend the IMS PTSA Welcome and Membership meeting. With that, there was a big overview from the principals there on what's happening in the school and the updates. I thought was great. But it jarred my memory and a conversation that we just had that typically this time of year, we renew or update our liaison assignments. So at the next meeting, I want to make sure we did that. So there was that. We continue to meet with our groups in East Side King County group, and our last meeting last Friday, we got to meet the new or the interim director of Seattle King County Public Health, Dennis Worsham, and Superintendent Kowalski joined us for that meeting. It's great to have you there. And something I highlighted from that meeting was, as we went down the list, Sarah Weigel, who's been our counterpart and worked with our district specifically, when they asked about outdoor masking, she was very clear that there was no strong guidance, that the K-12 guidance recommends masking outdoors for unvaccinated or the CDC guidance had that in public health, but when it came to the K-12 guidance, there just really wasn't strong guidance there. And I wanted to bring that up, that the questions that we're having are happening across our region, and those discussions are happening. And so Seattle and King County Public Health is leaning into that to try to suss out more guidance or more specific guidance in those areas. And we've made it clear to them that this is an area where more specific guidance would be very helpful to us in this area. Other than that, I mean, we had a really great meeting with them. It was just great to meet the interim director for the first time and kind of get his overview and kind of where he's headed in that in between time. And then the last reminder making upcoming dates and stuff in preparation in part for General Assembly. The Equity and Access Caucus and Federal Relations Caucuses will be meeting, and you can register for those. Anyone can participate in those, and it provides more information, helps to unpack that handbook. So it's really great. And the Director Area 2 regional meeting is coming up at the beginning of October. And it's open for registration right now, and there's an option for in-person or virtual. You can choose either right now. But this meeting, for the first time ever, is where we'll be able to nominate folks from our region to serve on the various committees, legislative committee and resolutions, and nominating, as well as the board of directors for WASDA. So it'll be an important meeting for all of us to be at if we can. But if we're all at the Director Area 2 meeting, I think there's some noticing that we have to do. So the earlier we know if there will be a quorum of us there, the sooner we can make that.
Do you know the date?
Was it 12th of October? It's going to be October 6th, from 6 to 7:30. And you can choose now if you want to choose the in-person option, and if they decide to not do that, you can easily move it over to the virtual option. But both are, it'll be a hybrid meeting. Those are also a great chance to hear in person from the health members from the State Board of Education there. The Superintendent Report is usually there. And we have other folks from the PSESD to provide updates and information about what's happening. So
do we need to notice, even if, like, I guess we do, yeah, if some of us are attending by Zoom and some are attending in person. So
I think it falls, it's not an exempt, but it's, if somebody wants to come and observe to make sure that we're not discussing any district business,
right,
we need to let them know that we're all together, and then we just don't discuss.
It would be a similar announcement as when the board has previously all attended the conference in person. We do announce that the board will be attending if there will be no action.
Right, right.
That type of announcement.
Just like updating my mental model, because normally I think in terms of like us all physically being in the same room, but that's not the case anymore. Okay, I have a little bit of an update, which is just that I was lucky enough to get to go on a tour of the new portable, or I guess modular buildings where pathways will be, and also the before and after school program at Northwood. And those buildings are amazing. So I really encourage you to go if you can get a tour, or wait until there's an open house and go to the open house if you can, because I'm very impressed, I have to say. Like, I didn't really have a good visualization of what was going to be in there. And first of all, they don't feel like portables. I mean, they completely feel like purpose-built freestanding buildings. Second of all, they're just like, they're very green. They have some kind of special certification like for that. Like, they're really well thought out. It's just and speaking as like wearing my occupational therapist hat for a moment, just wonderful opportunities for the students to learn both life skills and job skills, and just very, very well planned, very well executed. Like, I wanted to sign up for the after school program myself. I was like, I want to be in this building. This is just fantastic. So really nice to see what our facilities folks have been up to, and I was very impressed. So, yeah. Anybody else? Any updates? No? Okay, no updates. Good. right. Yeah, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye. All opposed? We are adjourned. It is 9:27 PM. Thank you all.